Chapter 366. Ji Nan. His star realm isn't even at the realm level yet, but he can already contend against Fang Chaoyun. If we wait until the future, Duanwanchi's expression was not too good. He shook his head. I'm afraid he'll reach Dao integration before the Dream Immortal returns. Cent-pound dragon, cent-pound altar, cent-pound book, cent-pound net. The Dream Immortal's return from the River of Time was already a foregone conclusion. Duanwanchi's words were a little exaggerated, but considering Ji Nan's terrifying rate of advancement, it was hard to say. However, the usually calm Lu Wen smiled bitterly. It's too late to say that now. Why would it be too late? A hint of viciousness flashed across Duanwanchi's face. As long as you're willing to act, killing Ji Nan is a piece of cake. Even killing Shui Ren is not impossible. The 13 heavens were never just for show. As long as they felt it was necessary, they would definitely act personally, just like the unreasonable Song Fei. If Lu Wen swallowed his pride and launched a sneak attack, he really had a good chance of killing Shui Ren. There was no need to even mention Ji Nan. What happens after I kill them? Lu Wen asked. Song Fei could kill Ji Nan that day. Why didn't he do it? Duanwanchi was startled. Then, he uttered a name with a bitter expression. Lorenza. That's right, it was Lorenza. As long as Lorenza did not leave, Ji Nan was like a cup of poisoned wine. It felt good when you drank it, but you had to pay a price after you drank it. Lorenza's divine kingdom was not here. At most, she would slaughter one of the 13 heavens and then leave. Who could stop her? It was really too difficult to kill a Dao integration cultivator. The death of every Dao integration stage cultivator was the result of tens of thousands of years of planning before they finally succeeded. But she has to leave. A hint of viciousness flashed across Duanwanchi's eyes. Let's see who can protect them when she returns. Extreme Sword Heaven. When Ji Nan set foot on this land again, he suddenly had a strange feeling. For an instant, it was as if someone was watching him. He knew that this was not an illusion. Someone was really looking at him. When he was in his own divine kingdom, the Dao integration cultivators could not keep an eye on him. However, once he left the divine kingdom, his whereabouts could not be hidden from those big shots. Ji Nan could not help but shake his head and chuckle. He did not expect to enjoy Shui Ren's treatment in advance. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment because Shui Ren immediately used the power of the astral boundary to shield him from the outside world. In the next moment, Ji Nan stepped into the sword sect, and his figure appeared at the peak of the sword sect. Shui Ren and Lorenza were already waiting for him. Apart from them, Ji Nan also saw a few familiar faces. Daoist Spirit Sun was undoubtedly present, but the person sitting in the main seat was an unexpected person, Zi Luo. My little friend Ji Nan, we meet again. Old man Zi Luo was still smiling, looking like a kind old man next door. However, Ji Nan knew that if he had guessed correctly, this old man was probably one of the first members of the Celestial Deity Society who had initiated it. Furthermore, if there was a position of president of the Celestial Deity Society, it would definitely belong to him. The whole situation became clearer in Ji Nan's mind. This old man Zi Luo had probably woken up many years ago, but he had never shown himself. It was only when Lorenza was about to advance that he walked to the front of the stage. Perhaps if it were not for him and Shui Ren, it would have been this old man himself who had helped to release the satellites. Ji Nan greeted a few people and waited quietly under Shui Ren's guidance for the other members to arrive. It did not take long before a few more astral lords arrived. Ji Nan recognized the identity of these people. All of them were famous great star lords. Before today, Ji Nan had never known that they were also members of the Celestial Deity Society. The list he had seen at Sylvia's place back then was clearly just a few peripheral members. The ones sitting before him were the core members. Ji Nan secretly calculated. Excluding Lorenza, there were only 8 astral lords present. In other words, there were only 8 core members of the Celestial Deity Society on the All Heavens side. Since everyone is here, let's begin, Shui Ren said after everyone had arrived. He looked around and his gaze finally fell on Lorenza. 2 major events have happened in the organization recently. I believe everyone knows about them. One is that Lorenza successfully fused with her Tao, and the other is that after 6,000 years, we finally have a new core member. Before Shui Ren could finish, a woman beside Ji Yunan covered her mouth and laughed. This woman was dressed in a luxurious light purple robe. She had a mature appearance, and her every movement exuded a different kind of charm. This was the Extreme Heaven's Astral Lord, the Grand Sage Celestial Empress. The Extreme Emperor Heaven was a typical star realm ruled by a celestial empire. Every generation's Astral Lord was chosen by the imperial family, and the competition was even more intense than in the profound Pure Realm. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress looked at Ji Yunan with a smile. Everyone present naturally knew about what he had done a few days ago. That's right. Shui Ren coughed lightly. Ji Yunan put in a lot of effort in Lorenza's promotion and even offended Song Fei. Does anyone have any objections to his promotion to a core member? The group of Starlords waved their hands and looked at Ji Yunan with more kindness in their eyes. Ji Yunan nodded slightly. He knew very well that it was necessary for him to be accepted by the Celestial Deity Society, but offending Song Fei was a better way to prove his loyalty. If Elder Zi Luo was the founder of the Celestial Deity Society, then the reason for the organization's existence was obvious. They wanted to establish a super-organization that spanned two great worlds and nurture their own Tao-fusing practitioners. Tao-fusing practitioners were inextricably linked, but belonging to the same organization was something that had never happened before. As expected, after Shui Ren finished speaking, Elder Zi Luo stood up and said, "Lorenza will eventually return to the other side. This old man has invited all of you here today because I want to tell everyone something." He looked around and said, "After today, the Celestial Deity Society will be exposed to the Tao-fusing practitioners. If everyone feels that their identities are in doubt and that the 13 heavens might suspect you, why don't you follow us to the world of gods?" With Lorenza gone, the 13 heavens would no longer be restricted. It would be a piece of cake for them to deal with the remaining people. Elder Zi Luo's words caused everyone to fall silent. They gradually woke up from the excitement of Lorenza's promotion. The current situation could not be considered a happy ending. On the contrary, it was filled with danger. But for everyone to abandon the star realm and go to the world of gods alone, existences at the level of the 13 heavens would not lower themselves to cause trouble for the star realm, but there were definitely many who would be willing to help beat a dog while it was down. Everyone fell into deep thought. Shui Ren was the first to express his opinion. He smiled faintly and said, "I'm definitely going to lie low for a while. Add me to the commenter above." This was Ji Yunan. Although they could not understand what he was saying, the meaning was clear. Taoist Master Spirit Sun quickly said, "I'm involved in too many things, so I won't stay here and risk my life." The remaining people were still hesitating. At this moment, Elder Zi Luo said, "Everyone, you can still think about it. But before I leave, this old man wants to collect some interest for what happened back then. Div class equals other_links, text download address, phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this page." Chapter 406, Discussion. Chapter 367. Extreme Sword Heaven, Sword Sect Mountain Gate. Dragon Altar Bookstore. The core members of the Divine God Society had already dispersed, each more cautious than the last. In the end, only Ji Yunan, Shui Ren, and Taoist Spirit Sun decided to follow Elder Zi Luo and Lorenza to the Pantheon world. The remaining four were either hesitant or had made up their minds to stay in the Pantheon world. At the very least, none of them had decided to leave. The four of them had rarely participated in the Divine God Society's affairs over the years, so the chances of them being exposed weren't high. That was why they were hoping to get lucky. After all, there was only a chance of being exposed if they didn't leave, but if they left, they would definitely be exposed. "You've all lived for tens of thousands of years, why can't you see through it?" Taoist Spirit Sun shook his head with a smile. "As long as you're alive, no one can take the astral plane away." At this moment, he, Shui Ren, and Ji Yunan were sitting on the peak of the Sword Sect Mountain, enjoying the mountain breeze and drinking mountain wine brewed from the sect spring. The destruction of the astral plane is equivalent to the waste of 10,000 years of effort. How many people can accept it? Shui Ren said with a smile, then looked at Ji Yunan. Are you sure you don't want a cup? As he spoke, he shook the wine cup in his hand at Ji Yunan. The name mountain wine was personally given by Shui Ren, and it had already become one of the sword sect's specialties. The spring water on the sword mountain naturally carried a soaring sword intent. The wine brewed from this water had a strong kick even before it entered the throat. Taoist Spirit Sun and Shui Ren had been good friends for many years. Usually, they would come here to drink mountain wine when they had nothing to do. This time, he brought Ji Yunan along. Unfortunately, Ji Yunan just waved his hand. In fact, he hadn't drunk wine for many years. After all, players played games and ate food and drinks to satisfy their appetites. That was all. Seeing that he wasn't interested, Shui Ren didn't force the issue. He said with a smile, Ji Yunan, you're quite carefree. The astral plane has only been built for a few decades, so it's not a pity to lose it. That's true, Ji Yunan thought for a moment and said, if there's a chance to protect it, that would be the best. To these Star Lords, a few decades was just a blink of an eye. However, Ji Yunan's gaming experience might not even add up to a few decades. It wasn't like Ji Yunan didn't have a way to protect his divine kingdom from the hands of a sovereign. There were things in this world that could be sealed in the astral plane, but it was the world of Pantheon. Ji Yunan was most familiar with the gods. He did not know if that thing would work on the heavenly worlds. Daoist Ling Yang nodded and said, it's a good thing that our astral boundary isn't damaged. Senior Zi Luo's trip this time is for our astral boundary. Oh! Ji Yunan raised his eyebrows and seemed to understand something. He smiled and said, then I'll have to wait and see. Ji Yunan said that he would wait and see, but in reality, he couldn't wipe his eyes, because what happened next would happen in the next 13 days, and no one but the person involved would be able to see it. Song Fei was injured. When this news came out, the entire heavenly worlds fell into a state of shock. Although they had guessed that the battle between the Tao integrators was inevitable from Lorenza's advancement, it had happened so quickly, and the one who was injured was Song Fei. This was Song Fei. Even among the 13 heavens, Shi Daotian was one of the few who ranked near the top. After confirming that the news came from the 13 heavens and was very likely to be true, people's attention immediately shifted from Song Fei to another question. Who had injured Song Fei? No news spread that day, but on the second day, the entire matter was clearly spread. At the same time, there was another piece of news. The Heavenly Gods Society, the organization behind the heavenly worlds and the gods, finally stepped forward for the first time. Song Fei had been healing his disciple Fang Chaoyun in the pure grace heaven when two people suddenly descended and injured him. One of them was the newly ascended Tao integrator, the Lord of Flowers, Lorenza. The other person's identity once again made countless people's jaws drop. The one who had attacked was Elder Zi Luo. This old man, who had been asleep for close to 100,000 years, had actually participated in the battle between the Tao integrators as an ordinary Star Lord. As the news continued to spread, the details of that battle were gradually revealed. People gradually discovered that Elder Zi Luo seemed to have played a very important role in that battle. Song Fei had temporarily placed himself in a state of emptiness to heal his disciple. However, the one who had seized the opportunity to strike Song Fei's weak spot was Elder Zi Luo. And Lorenza had only provided the power for the final blow. In other words, any other Tao integrator could have done this, but Elder Zi Luo was irreplaceable. After this old man injured Song Fei, he said, I taught you everything you know. Everything you know was taught by me. If you want revenge, bring the 9 spirits with you and find me. So Song Fei is also Elder Zi Luo's disciple. How unexpected. Duan Wenqi had a thoughtful look on his face. He and Lu Wen had not witnessed the fall of Elder Zi Luo, but they were relatively recent, so they had some understanding of the feud between the two. Everyone thought that Song Fei and Elder Zi Luo did not have much connection, and that the latter had been in Song Fei's way, which was why Song Fei had set him up. But now that these words were spoken, the word teacher-killer had appeared above Song Fei's head. That's a little strange. Lu Wen patted Long Ling Er's wings on his shoulder, indicating for her to go around on her own. With Elder Zi Luo's style, he shouldn't have said something like that. Seems a little too arrogant. Duan Wenqi laughed. He clearly wants to protect Shui Ren, Ji Yunan, and the other star realms, so that they will have some misgivings. I'm afraid that they will soon flee. Lu Wen's eyes lit up. So that's how it is. I've been called the 13 heavens for too long, and my vision has been limited. The onlooker sees more clearly in everything. Previously, it was Lu Wen who had pointed this out to Duan Wunshi. Now that the matter involved Dao convergence practitioners, and Lu Wen himself was involved, it was Duan Wunshi who could see things more clearly. Right now, the known members of the Heavenly Deity Society are Zi Luo, Lorenza, Shui Ren, and Ji Yunan. A world breaker, 2 peak great astral lords, and a little monster who could injure Fang Chaoyun in his own star realm. Duan Wunshi continued, now that Zi Luo has done this, even if Lorenza leaves, the Heavenly Deity Society's reputation has been established. Lu Wen nodded lightly, his fingers tapping on the table. If they really leave, it will be our chance. A smile appeared on Lu Wen's face as he gently placed the chess piece in front of him down, pressing it down on another chess piece. The chess piece below him instantly shattered, and its position was replaced by the one in his hand. Lu Wenying is dead, but some people are still alive. And some people aren't afraid of the Heavenly Deity Society. Go find trouble with Ji Yunan? Duan Wunshi's eyes lit up, and he immediately asked. No. Lu Wen retracted his hand, and a strand of sword intent suddenly appeared on the chess piece. It's Shui Ren. Div class equals other underscore links text download address phone reading for convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this time. Chapter 407, Introduction. Chapter 368. When Ji Yunan and the others saw Old Man Zi Luo and Lorenza again, they were already on the front lines. Dragon. Altar. Books. Net coincidentally, they came to the Heavens Land. Of course, it might not be a coincidence. Daoist Spirit Sun was responsible for this coincidence. After greeting each other, Old Man Zi Luo suddenly raised his head. Crazy Fist is here. It seems that what I did before was not in vain. The old man smiled, seemingly very happy that someone had come. The Frenzied Fist referred to the Martial Ancestor Realm Star Lord. The Martial Ancestor Realm was an old astral realm, and the astral lord was named Crazy Fist. It is said that this was his nickname in his early years. When he became a Star Lord, he even threw away his name and used Crazy Fist as his name. The Martial Ancestor Realm was a very special star realm. Although it was only at the realm level, the power of the Star Lord's Frenzied Fist was something that many heaven-grade Star Lords could not compare to. Unfortunately, Crazy Fist did not pay much attention to the construction of Astral Boundary, which was why Astral Boundary itself was a hindrance. Crazy Fist was also one of the core members of the Celestial God Society. He hadn't come with them earlier, but now he had probably changed his mind. Old man, what did you say? Didn't we agree to meet at this time? What did you do this time? Crazy Fist was shocked when he heard Zi Luo's words. This was the first time Ji Yunan and Lorenza had seen Crazy Fist. They were a little surprised to see him like this. Could it be that this person was truly a martial arts fanatic? He didn't even know about the major events of the past 2 days. All right, stop pretending. Shui Ren, who was familiar with him, walked up to Ji Yunan and said, this guy likes to pretend to be a martial arts fanatic. Deep down, he's smarter than anyone else. Crazy Fist smiled shyly and said, only those who seek to win are called martial arts fanatics. For the sake of victory, what's wrong with pretending to be a martial arts fanatic? Makes sense. Ji Yunan nodded at him and said, right. Right. Crazy Fist seemed to be very happy that there was someone who could agree with his theory. Lorenza still did not speak. Old Man Zi Luo said, let's go. Come back as soon as possible. He looked at Ji Yunan and the other two. With this old man making a move earlier, there won't be many who would dare to make a move in public. However, there will be many who will make small moves. The celestial deities walked to the front of the stage, and even Song Fei was injured by them. This immediately made the Star Lords who wanted to beat the dog while it was down retract their thoughts. No one knew if the Empyrean would make a comeback after a period of time. If such a day really came, today's pleasure might very well become the root of tomorrow's trouble. However, It was just as old man Ziluo had said, there were very few people who dared to jump out in public, but there were always people who would secretly play tricks. Clear River Realm. As the largest commercialized astral realm in the heavens, the Qinghe realm had been developing faster than other astral realms of the same level under the leadership of Realm Lord Zhong Qinghe. After all, if it was done properly, the potential of commerce was far greater than that of agriculture, and trade was the only way to circulate resources. On this day, Zhong Qinghe had just finished an internal meeting of the Chamber of Commerce when he was stopped by a vice president. "Sir, I made an appointment with your secretary last week. There are some things I want to discuss with you," the vice president said respectfully. "Old Jew, there's no need to be so polite with me. Sit." Zhong Qinghe casually invited him to sit, as if he was one of his own. Old Jew showed a grateful expression and said, "Sir, do you still remember Lu Xin? Ji. Remonstrance Lan Shu? Xiao. Dumpling Huang? A." Zhong Qinghe nodded. "Xin. Niece's words are vague and hesitant. Forgive me. Old man's grave. Pleasing. Stretching. Words Chuan Hui. Lang Tui Wei." "We found the young Miss Old Jew immediately said." Zhong Qinghe raised his head and looked at Laro Jew. There was finally a hint of surprise in his eyes. Old Jew cleared his throat and said, "Our forces in Bloody City have been uprooted. However, the clues left behind all point to Ji Yunan. Ji Yunan? His astral plane appeared, and you found Little Butterfly there?" Zhong Qinghe's expression did not change. "Sir is wise." Old Jew quickly flattered Zhong Qinghe. Zhong Qinghe had a peaceful smile on his face as he said casually, "Then you can go and bring her back." Old Jew was startled and quickly left, but he did not see Zhong Qinghe's strange smile behind him. Ji Yunan and the others passed through the dimensional wall and entered the Pantheon world smoothly. There were almost no obstacles. In fact, no one would stop them. Was it not stupid to stop a converged path user from returning to the Pantheon world? Instead, the moment Lorenza returned to the Pantheon world, the original 12 overgods all sensed it at the same time, and a black-haired girl in a long dress descended. "Welcome back, Lorenza." The black-haired girl seemed to want to give Lorenza a hug, but the latter ignored her. Shueren glanced at her and moved closer to Ji Yunan. "Who is this?" The personification of the night, the dark goddess Daisy. Ji Yunan played the role of a commentator and answered without hesitation. He knew that many people suspected that he was from the Pantheon world, and he had no intention of hiding it. Let them guess. No one would be able to guess the truth anyway. The dark goddess Daisy, a top-notch god among the 12 overgods, had personally come to welcome Lorenza's return. In fact, Lorenza's ascension was definitely a pleasant surprise for the Darkness Pantheon. They already had 7 spots among the 12 overgods, and the Light Pantheon had relied on the Lord of Light and Justice's superpower to not be at a disadvantage in the battle. Now that the Darkness Pantheon had gained another member, the situation in the Pantheon world would change again. Daisy and Lorenza's conversation did not last long. Some deeper things would not be discussed in such a place. After parting ways with Daisy, Lorenza brought Ji Yunan and the others back to her god kingdom. Compared to the dangerous Pantheon world, the god kingdom of an overgod was undoubtedly the safest place. "You're leaving?" Lorenza looked at Ji Yunan in surprise. "Your 13 skies can influence some people here. It's dangerous for you to go out now." Ji Yunan simply smiled. "I know, but I do have something to do." Facing Ji Yunan's insistence, Lorenza finally nodded and said, "Sylvia said she wanted to visit you." "I'll be back soon," Ji Yunan said after some thought. "As for Sylvia, she can wait for me in the Dragon Realm." "All right." At the same time that his main body arrived in the world of gods, Ji Yunan, who was hiding in a small plane, slowly opened his eyes. It's time to start the plan of the player army. But before that, Ji Yunan's gaze returned to his astral world. There are still some small bugs to deal with. There, Zhong Dai was staring blankly at the 2 men in black who had appeared in front of her. LTPGT, div class equals other_links, download address, phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this time. Chapter 408 Introduction. Chapter 369. Young mistress, please come with us. Dragon. Altar. Book. Two men in black stood in front of Zhong Dai. Their voices were respectful and determined. Who are you? Zhong Dai tilted her head, her expression innocent. The two of them looked at each other. The one on the left stepped forward. Hidden guards 3556 and 357 of the Chamber of Commerce greet young mistress. Zhong Dai blinked and had a look of realization. My father sent you. Can you tell my father that I don't want to go back? The one who spoke shook his head. You have to at least go back and see him. Then I won't be able to come out. Zhong Dai pouted. Her face was full of regret. In the next moment, a red light flashed in front of her. Her right hand had already reached out. The red light came too quickly. Before the man in front of Zhong Dai could react, Zhong Dai's right hand had already stabbed into his heart. Trash. You're all trash. Old Ju's real name was Ju Shi. Lucian. Cai Qiao Yong. Xian Biao Qiao Yong. Arc 5. Uprooting and slackening by the bird Ping Zheng. Xian Na. Despicable. You knew that young mistress had a group of blood clan members with her, yet you still sent 2 pieces of trash. Tell me, are you not trash? Bang. A porcelain cup was smashed onto the ground. It symbolized that old Ju's anger had reached the point of eruption. The subordinates in front of him all stood straight with their heads lowered, not daring to say a word. Old Ju scolded the 2 people who attacked as trash. His subordinates were also trash, but no one dared to refute him. To put it bluntly, he was right. The United Chamber of Commerce of the Clear River Realm had actually let a spoiled young mistress like Zhong Dai escape. If this was the time when the Chamber of Commerce had just expanded and was most militarized, they could have just killed themselves. More importantly, it would not be easy to find Zhong Dai again after she escaped. She was not an idiot. Knowing that someone wanted to capture her, why would she show herself in public? Only when old Ju was tired of scolding did one of them speak carefully. Actually, we already used many methods to lure away the blood clan members around young mistress. Young mistress killed the 2 hidden guards herself. Eldest miss personally? Old Ju was slightly startled and frowned. He had just received the news and hadn't had the time to understand the details. When he heard his subordinate's words, he was shocked. He, old Ju, had watched Zhong Dai grow up, so he knew her best. After going to Ji Yunan's God Kingdom, he was now able to kill 2 world breakers. Even if the 2 of them had only taken the first step to break the world, the person who could have killed them was definitely a break-world being. The underling looked at old Ju's face and went on to say, the big lady has broken the world. It looks like she has become a blood. Bang. The other cup on old Ju's table was also smashed by him. He was about to curse again when he felt his mind go blank. In the next moment, a silver-robed figure appeared in front of him, and his subordinates fell to the ground at the same time. When he took a closer look, all of them had been decapitated. You! Elder Ju stood up abruptly. When he recognized the identity of the person, cold sweat dripped down his forehead. The sky was full of news. The person should have gone to God's world by now. Why was he here? No, this was a clone. Old Ju was someone who often saw planet leaders. He quickly recognized that it was not the original. What made him feel helpless was that even if it was just a clone, it would have been easy for the person to kill him. There is something I want you to do. Ji Yunan's voice did not have any emotion. It sounded very natural. It was like he was ordering his subordinates. Old Ju forced a smile and said, "Tell me what you want. As long as I can do it, I want a bunch of time crystal cores. I will give you 3 days to bring them here," Ji Yunan coldly said. "Do not play tricks. Within 3 steps, not even Zhong Qinghe can protect you." Old Ju's heart felt bitter. He hated himself for not being in Clear River World. Why did he have to do things in this small place? But a vice president like him was not in headquarters most of the time. There was nothing he could do about it. Zhong Dai alone could take care of 2 world breakers. Not only was old Ju shocked, but even Ji Yunan was surprised. The player model was powerful. Zhong Dai, who had the origin blood, would not be much slower than the average player. At most, she would lack direction. But this strengthened his idea of building a player army. He had old Ju search for the time crystal cores to transport a batch of potential seedlings to God's world. If he could have a player army under his command, he'd be invincible in the upcoming Divine Kingdom War with his Tier 4 strength. No organization could stop the impact of a group of level 4 players. Gu Nan had planned to do this. He had even prepared the seedlings, but he did not have the time to collect the time crystal cores. Many people knew about the existence of Gu Nan's clone. Red Tail, Lan Sai, and even Yang Xiaoxiao in the Divine Kingdom were probably being watched. As soon as the body of a saint appeared, it would be taken down immediately. While his clone was keeping an eye on old Ju, Gu Nan's main body had already arrived in the Pantheon World's Dragon Realm. As expected, Sylvia was already waiting for him there. "How did you know I was at this entrance?" Sylvia asked curiously when she saw Gu Nan. The structure of God's world was different from the heavenly planes. Apart from a few main planes, normal planes like Dragon's World could not be entered and exited easily. The space here was more secure, and there was no such thing as entering at will. Normal planes had fixed entrances. However, Dragon's World was a famous plane. When the ancient dragon god was still alive, it had once become one of the main planes. There were definitely many entrances. "You only know of this entrance, right?" Gu Nan did not even turn his head as he slowly stepped into Dragon's World. "I heard you were taught a lesson by Duo Oin in the past." Duo Oin was the clan leader of the Metal Dragon race. He was a very old dragon. When Sylvia was young, she had a conflict with Doween. At that time, the old dragon god was still alive. In the end, they tried to smooth things over, and no one ended up well. After the old dragon god died, Sylvia was not a vengeful person, so she did not think of seeking revenge for so many years. It was only when Gu Nan mentioned this that she looked at him in surprise. "You even know about this?" This was something that happened tens of thousands of years ago, and it could not be any younger. If one did not personally experience that era, it would be almost impossible for one to know about it. She looked at Gu Nan suspiciously. Her guess about his identity seemed to be narrowed down to a very small range. LTPGT, div class equals other underscore links text download address phone reading. For convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 409, Introduction. Chapter 370. Gu Nan did not know what she was thinking about, nor was he interested. Dragon. Altar. Book. Net. Besides, he would not tell Sylvia that he was not the only one who knew about her and Du Haowen's past. Every player who had completed the Dragonoid mission knew about it. Dragonoids were one of the special races that players could reincarnate into. Furthermore, this race was far superior to the Blood Clan. At the end of the day, the Blood Clan was just a dark clan that was half undead. It was already impressive for a clan to have 10 people in the legendary realm. What about the Dragon Clan? As long as a pure-blooded individual grew up normally, they would naturally reach the legendary realm when they reached adulthood. Even a mixed-blood Dragonoid was much stronger than the Blood Clan. Not only did the Dragonoids retain the strong foundation of the Dragon Clan, but they also had the short growth cycle of the human clan and the unlimited potential for evolution. From the moment he decided to build a player army, the Dragonoids were already a line that Gu Nan was determined to get. However, he did not come here for the Dragonoids. In the Dragon Realm, there was a tool that could temporarily seal the God Kingdom. Perhaps it could be used to preserve his God Kingdom. "Are we going to find trouble with Duo Aoin then?" Sylvia's voice was filled with eagerness. Even though she was a god with a bad memory, when the name Du Haowen appeared in her mind again, she could not help but recall the grudge of the past. In fact, in the original game, players had to go through a prerequisite mission to meet Sylvia and let her recall the past. Now, Gu Nan did not have to go through so much trouble. He could just ask for it. He needed Du Haowen's fresh blood and the heads of 20 metal dragons to open the dragon's tomb. He could do this without Sylvia, but it would be best to not attract too much attention with her as a shield. "No, let's go and get something first." The Dragon Realm was a very large plain. There were countless islands floating in the sea, but in the center was a vast continent. Just like what was written in many fantasy novels, this continent was known as the Dragon God Continent, and legendary stories often began here. Of course, the Dragon God continent did not only have the Dragon clan. Like all other planes, the main race here was the human clan, which had amazing reproductive abilities. In the northwestern part of the continent, the Fire Dragon Empire, under the protection of the Red Dragon, ruled over millions of citizens. In the Fire Dragon Empire, there was a Prince Charlie whose name shook the world. His reputation was comparable to that of his legendary father. "I'm looking for Charlie." Ji Nan brought Sylvia directly to the Fire Dragon Empire's palace. The servant who was caught by Ji Nan could feel the immense pressure from the two of them, and he couldn't help but stutter, Yes, I'll go and inform, just tell me where he is." A moment later, Ji Nan was standing in front of Charlie's door. Sylvia's lips twitched. "If you're looking for someone, they'll naturally come to us as long as we reveal our identities." With Sylvia's status, she would definitely not stoop to doing things so sneakily. However, Ji Nan did not like to play the game of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. It was just that it was not suitable to expose his identity here. Otherwise, going to do Aowen's territory and using Sylvia's name would be too deliberate. Sylvia saw that he did not reply, so she asked, "Why are you looking for this mortal?" "To get him to pull out a sword for me." "Oh, these greedy mortals will definitely take the opportunity to ask for a high reward." Sylvia looked as if she had suffered a great deal. Ji Nan only looked at her as if she was a tycoon. Pushing the door open, Prince Charlie quickly appeared in front of Ji Nan and Sylvia. He was teaching a young lady a lesson. "In the land of the far west, there's a sword in the stone." Ji Nan did not converse with the two of them, and only spoke as if he was chanting a spell. As soon as he finished speaking, he and Sylvia had already disappeared. Until they left, Prince Charlie and his little sister Alice were still in a daze. Little Alice was the first to regain her senses. She said excitedly, "Brother, did you hear that? There's a sword in the stone in the west." And two gods' envoys even personally came to inform us. In the world of gods, the legend of the sword in the stone had always been linked to the succession of the throne. It was a symbol of the emperor chosen by God. And for God's envoys to deliver the will of God was something that would only happen in novels. They did not expect it to actually happen in front of them. If it were any other prince, they might be in fear and trepidation when faced with such a situation, but Prince Charlie was different. The reason why Prince Charlie was famous was because of his great talent and outstanding military achievements. It was almost certain that he would inherit the throne. To him, the sword in the stone appearing and the gods' envoys coming to him was a beautiful story. "What kind of place is the land of the far west?" Sylvia asked curiously as she walked alongside Ji Nan. "The world is round, there's no such thing as the land of the far west." Ji Nan revealed an expression as if he was looking at a slacker. "To the west of Fire Dragon Country is the Heavy Silver Island." "Don't tell me you don't know that." Sylvia was stunned. As mentioned before, her understanding of the dragon world was definitely not deep, and her knowledge of the geography was even more of a mess. But at least she knew that the Heavy Silver Island was the lair of the giant metal dragons, and also Du Aowen's residence. A week later, Prince Charlie led his team of adventurers, and after many hardships, they finally arrived at the outskirts of the Heavy Silver Island. Then, they were stopped by a dragon. "Leave immediately. Lowly humans, the Heavy Silver Island is not a place for you." Rumble. As a bolt of lightning fell from the sky, the giant metal dragon was struck in the head, and its huge body fell heavily to the ground. Charlie and the rest looked at each other, but since the obstacle had fallen, they did not dare to delay any longer, and hurriedly set off for the interior of the Heavy Silver Island. "Hey! A dragon that was struck unconscious by lightning, isn't this too funny?" Sylvia walked out of the shadows slowly, seemingly dissatisfied with Ji Nan's clumsy methods. Although manipulating adventurers for their own use was a common tactic used by the gods, they would never play such a ridiculous game. Metals attract lightning easily, this is common knowledge. Ji Nan curled his lips, and even though he was talking about irrelevant theories, he was already walking inside. But before he could take a few steps, Ji Nan suddenly stopped, and looked ahead with a slightly surprised expression. "We're not too lucky, we got caught up in something. Du Aowen was a troublemaker, and he had caused countless troubles, so it was not surprising to see him in trouble. But to encounter the most troublesome one, it could only be said that Ji Yunan's luck was too good. Or rather, Sylvia's luck was too bad. The shadow goddess also realized who was on the heavy silver island, and her expression changed slightly. "I'll leave first, there's something, it's too late." Sylvia was slightly startled, and then she heard an angry roar coming from the front. "Sylvia, you've come out to seduce men again. Div class equals other_links text download address cell phone reading. For the convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this time." Chapter 410 Introduction. Chapter 371. An angry female voice came from the heavy silver island. Her voice almost spread across the entire island, especially the word seduce. "Dragon. Altar. Book. Net." Sylvia's face turned red at a visible speed. She was afraid that she might make a bigger fool of herself, so she turned around and was about to leave. However, as soon as she turned around, a wild figure had already appeared in front of her. It was a girl wearing a leopard print skirt and holding a golden spear in her hand. Her tough facial features added some toughness to her. Karina, the goddess of combat, was a level 8 goddess known as the Amazon Valkyrie by the players. She was famous for her violence, and her combat ability was way beyond the power of a god. But at the same time, Karina also had a tender feeling that others could not understand. She was the #1 fan of Austin, the Lord of Light and Justice. Ever since the Second War of Gods, she had been pursuing the Lord of Light, even though Austin was not the Lord of Light yet. "Sylvia, you're Austin's sister. How can you hang out with a man?" Karina glared at the goddess of shadow. Sylvia could not help but roll her eyes. She turned around and said, "It's none of your business who I'm with." Karina sighed, as if she was a helpless mother looking at her daughter. "Of course, it's your freedom to like whoever you like. But before your brother and I get married, you should keep yourself clean." The shadow goddess felt that she was going to lose her mind. She pointed at Karina and yelled, "My brother will marry you. You're a pig in heat. Stop dreaming." Ji Yunan, who had never seen Sylvia like this, couldn't help but look at the two of them in astonishment. Karina, the Valkyrie, was quite famous in the game. However, even Ji Yunan had never seen her together with Sylvia. As a matter of fact, there were not many quests related to Sylvia in the game. Most of the time, the shadow goddess was invisible. Feeling embarrassed, Sylvia glanced at Ji Yunan and then glared at Karina. Being insulted like this, Karina was not angry at all. Instead, she was a bit shy. "Being too passionate is indeed my shortcoming, and I want to overcome it. But every time I see Austin," Miss Valkyrie, who had sunk deep into her thoughts, blushed and even forgot to speak. At this time, Ji Yunan suddenly raised his head and pointed behind Karina. "Austin, where?" Karina turned around in surprise, and then she felt a sharp pain on the back of her head. Ji Yunan's fist had already landed on her. Karina staggered a bit. Then she screamed and jumped at Ji Yunan. Without any hesitation, Ji Yunan punched back at her. After a few rounds, Karina smiled, as if nothing had happened. "You're quite a good fighter. Sylvia has made a good choice this time." "Shut up." Sylvia had every reason to be angry. She was just communicating with some male gods, but every time Karina bumped into her, Sylvia would accuse her of seduction. "Austin." Ji Yunan pointed at the back. "Where?" Karina was punched in the back of her head again. "Austin. Austin. Austin. Do you think I'm an idiot?" Karina yelled at Ji Yunan angrily. She felt a bit dizzy after being punched twice in the back of her head. "Austin." Ji Yunan was still yelling. Karina turned around again, not entirely convinced. Bang! After another heavy punch, the Valkyrie finally passed out. Ji Yunan waved his right hand, which was still in pain, and said to Sylvia, "Let's go. We need to take care of Duo Aowen first. She should wake up soon." Sylvia followed Ji Yunan in a daze. It seemed that she could not believe that Ji Yunan had taken care of Karina, who had been a headache for countless gods, just like that. Of course, Ji Yunan would not tell her that Karina had also been a headache for many players before. In the end, Ji Yunan came up with this temporary method. But that was all. It was almost impossible to kill this thick-skinned woman. Karina was not an ordinary god. She had a big secret. One of the main quests in the game was to help Karina become the main god. If Lucian wanted to help the gods of light win the Fourth Divine War, this was one of the few quests. Karina was an unkillable cockroach. Once she became the main god, she would be as powerful as Austin, and even Lady Daisy would be suppressed by her. Not to mention that Ji-Yunan was only at rank 7, which was slightly lower than Karina. Even if he had reached rank 10, it would still be very difficult for him to kill Karina. Only after the players became a second-class advancement would it be easier for them to kill Karina again. However, at that stage, the items on the Valkyrie would not be of much use to the players anymore. They would only be able to satisfy some players' hobbies. Ji-Yunan did not care about Karina, who was lying on the ground. For him, Karina's appearance only added a condition to his plan. Before the Valkyrie woke up, he had to take care of the metal dragons. I need to speed up. But this way, I won't be able to blame everything on Sylvia, Ji-Yunan thought to himself. Which one came to the heavy silver island? An old voice came from the depths of the island. Ji-Yunan and Selena knew it better than anyone else. It was the old dragon, Du Howin. He thought that Karina's appearance would be enough to send Sylvia and Selena away, but he did not expect that. In the blink of an eye, Ji-Yunan arrived at the center of the island. A silver dragon was flying in the air. Seeing Ji-Yunan, it paused for a moment before swinging its tail at him. Little Evan, stop. Du Howin did not expect Ji-Yunan to act so quickly. By the time he opened his mouth to stop Ji-Yunan, it was already too late. Ji-Yunan did not even raise his head. He grabbed the silver dragon's tail and shook it lightly. A huge force was instantly transmitted to the dragon. Metal Dragon Evan froze in the air. Ji-Yunan then dropped his right hand, and the dragon fell to the ground. Smoke and dust filled the air. Ji-Yunan stood in the air, still holding the dragon's tail in his hand. He looked at the figure in front of him with a cold gaze. It was an old man in a long robe. Wrinkles covered his face, showing how old he was. After all, dragons were not born gods. There was a limit to how long they could live. Du Howin had lived for tens of thousands of years, but now he was old. Evan was one of the clansmen he had high hopes for. At the same time, he was also his direct descendant. But now, he was lying on the ground powerlessly. His tail was like a mark of shame, held in the hand of the man in front of him. LTPGT, div class equals other underscore links text download mobile reading for the convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 411, The End. Chapter 372. Du Howin knew that the person in front of him had come with Sylvia, and he most likely did not come with good intentions. Dragon Audiobook Network. However, the old dragon had offended too many people in his life, and it was not the first time that someone had come to seek revenge. He was already very experienced. With a solemn expression, he said, "Your Excellency, this is the dragon world, and the metal dragons are, Joshua, I know." Ji-Yunan smiled coldly and finished Du Howin's sentence. The White Raven god, Joshua, was the god who protected the metal dragons. To be able to subdue a branch of the dragon race, he was naturally not an ordinary god. In fact, Joshua was a ninth-order god. However, Ji-Yunan did not mind it too much. After all, Joshua was a very lazy god. He was powerful, treated his subordinates well, and held grudges. He was not a god who was suitable to be enemies with. However, the White Raven god's problem was that he was not interested in anything, and he would drag things out for 3 days. If Du Howin sent a distress signal, Joshua would not even look at it. Nothing could disturb his afternoon nap. Du Howin felt a little helpless when he encountered a god who was not afraid of Joshua. He could only say, "Your Excellency." Ji-Yunan casually grabbed little Evan's tail and threw him in front of Du Howin. He said casually, "I am only here to look for something. I will leave once I find it. You will be fine as long as you cooperate. If not, your whole family will die. Do you understand?" Ji-Yunan said as he pointed at Du Howin. Du Howin had been the patriarch of the metal dragons for tens of thousands of years. When had he ever been threatened so directly? Du Howin's old face was gloomy. He wanted to make a move, But he did not dare to. The person in front of him was the one who defeated Karina. If he wanted to give in, it would be embarrassing. Such a huge commotion had already alerted the other dragon clansmen on the island. Ji Yunan did not look at him again. It did not matter what Du Haoan chose. In fact, he only had two choices. Cooperate if alive, or cooperate if dead. Prince Charlie's team went deeper and deeper into the island. The huge movement in the center of the island made them feel frightened, but also a little more expectant. Brother, the sword in the stone must be right in front. We need to hurry up. Little Alice, who had secretly followed the team, shouted beside Charlie. Alice's forehead was full of sweat, and her long blonde hair was almost sticking to her face, but she still looked very excited. There's no harm in being careful. Prince Charlie quickly pulled her back and reminded her again. I know. Could that be the sword in the stone? Alice's surprised voice sounded, and Charlie quickly looked up. Indeed, there was a broken sword stabbed into the ground in front of him. You found it so easily? Charlie seemed to be in disbelief. He felt that his adventure this time should not have been so simple. However, the sword in the stone was right before his eyes. There was no reason for him to hesitate. He rushed forward and pulled out the broken sword. Then nothing happened. The broken sword was still a broken sword. The next moment, Charlie felt two shadows emerge from the ground, grabbing him like tentacles and pouncing forward. Not long after, a huge body appeared in front of him, and the broken sword had already pierced into it. This is a dragon. Charlie, who had calmed down, realized that the broken sword had pierced into a silver dragon, and its body was covered with metal scales. However, these shockingly hard scales were like paper in front of the broken sword. What is that human holding in his hand? Du Haoan shouted crazily. He had already sensed a special aura coming from the broken sword. When the broken sword was first pulled out, there was nothing special about it. However, the moment it entered Evan's body, countless vengeful spirits from the dragon race seemed to emerge at the same time. This kind of special weapon had a special name in the world. Dragon Slayer. Sylvia frowned slightly. She did not expect Ji Yunan to find this. Dragon Slayer Saber. Ji Yunan said the nickname that the players had for this sword. Prince Charlie pulled out the broken sword in a daze. However, he realized that it was no longer appropriate to call it broken sword. After being washed in dragon blood, the rust on the sword had completely faded, revealing its original appearance. It was a short sword that glowed with a golden radiance. As expected of the sword in the stone, Prince Charlie muttered. However, he saw a black shadow flash before his eyes, and the sword in his hand was snatched away. Prince Charlie looked over angrily. He saw the oracle that he had met the other day holding the golden short sword and examining it carefully. Every dragon slayer had a hidden attribute of dragon's resentment, which had a strong taunting effect on the dragon race. The appearance of this short sword on the heavy silver island would instantly attract the pursuit of countless dragons, and that was Ji Yunan's goal. He needed the heads of 20 metal dragons, but the dragons were all cowardly and fast. Rather than wasting time chasing after them, he might as well find someone to pull the short sword out. Charlie was not so happy that Ji Yunan had obtained the sword. However, the talented prince did not have any intention of questioning Ji Yunan sternly. Instead, he showed a respectful expression. I am willing to offer the divine sword as a gift to the gods. May I know the name of the god? He had guessed that the two people in front of him must be the oracles of some god. They were just greedy. After all, the oracles were not all good people. However, as long as he knew the identity of the god, he would be able to get back at him today. Maybe the god would even give him more compensation. Gods would often encounter situations where they needed mortals to complete certain tasks for them, and a good reputation was very important. However, Ji Yunan just glanced at him and then stabbed the golden short sword into his abdomen. Don't think too much. He patted Prince Charlie's shoulder. Brother, Your Highness Charlie. Cries of alarm came from behind. Then, a golden light flashed, and a large number of corpses fell to the ground. This sword is genuine. Ji Yunan shook off the bloodstains on the sword and nodded. Why? Sylvia was already behind him. Slaying dragons is smooth, but slaying humans is not smooth. The corner of Sylvia's mouth twitched as she looked deeply at Ji Yunan. I'm afraid that your reputation here will be ruined by your actions, and no one will dare to work for you in the future. If word got out that a god would slaughter adventurers who worked for him. I'm fine. Ji Yunan smiled at her. Sylvia, on the other hand, was very serious. Karina already knows that you're here. Don't think that no one will find out if you kill everyone here. Ji Yunan glanced at her, then raised the short sword in his hand and looked at the metal dragons that were gradually gathering over, attracted by the dragon slayer. In the name of Princess Sylvia, die, blasphemer Doween. A loud shout echoed throughout the entire Heavy Silver Island. LTPGT, div class equals other _ links download address cell phone reading. For the convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 412 Chapter 4. Chapter 373. Following Ji Yunan's shout, not only did the metal dragons start to gather, but Dean the Blasphemer also fell into a state of confusion. This was because while Ji Yunan was speaking, he turned the dagger in his hand and stabbed it into Du Haowen's chest. Didn't you say that everything would be fine if I cooperated with you? Honest Dragon roared. Ji Yunan thought for a while and decided to throw the blame away. In the name of Lady Sylvia, there is no such thing as credibility with a dead man. Standing next to Ji Yunan, Sylvia's face was all dark. She said angrily, don't think that you can frame me like this. Karina can be my witness. Who would believe the words of that lunatic? Ji Yunan curled his lips. Du Haowen's blood flowed and stuck to the golden dagger. The aura of the dragon's resentment became stronger and stronger, causing more and more metal dragons to gather. It was true that the dragon race had the habit of being greedy for life and afraid of death, but when they were faced with a pushover, they could perfectly display the pride of the dragon race. Not many people below the level of God could recognize Karina. Instead, what Ji Yunan said made him seem more like Sylvia's oracle. Other than God, the great dragon race had never been afraid of anyone. The first metal dragon arrived at the center of the Heavy Silver Island. Its huge body streaked across the sky, and at the same time, it saw a shocking scene below. A man and a woman stood in the air, while Du Haowen had already fallen to the side. On the ground was a huge dragon's body. The giant metal dragon was stunned. It did not understand what was going on. There was no need for him to figure it out. In the next moment, a golden light flashed in the sky, and the metal dragon's neck was severed. Its huge head fell to the ground. Soon after, his head fell to the ground, followed by his corpse. His death did not stop his companions from dying. Firstly, it was because the deaths happened too quickly. The Heavy Silver Island was not big, and the dragon race could reach it quickly. Now, it became the cause of their deaths. Secondly, the power of the dragon's resentment was too strong, causing the giant dragons to be far less clear-headed than usual. So the second, the third. More and more dragons came, and more corpses were left behind, but Ji Yunan seemed to have never moved. Every time he attacked, his movements were too fast, beheading a dragon and then returning. As a result, it looked like he was standing still, while the giant dragons were inexplicably beheaded. It was not until the smell of blood permeated the entire island that the dragon's resentment on the golden dagger had solidified, turning the dagger purplish red, that Ji Yunan finally stopped. He had no choice but to stop, because there were no more stupid dragons coming to die. The valley where Doween lived was now filled with headless dragon corpses. Their heads had been collected by Ji Yunan and were placed in the middle of the valley in a strange formation. Du Haowen's blood was also scattered in the middle, slowly flowing, as if forming a thin line, connecting the 20 giant dragons' heads together. This is the dragon grammar formation. Sylvia was knowledgeable and could tell what Ji Yunan was doing at a glance. Du Haowen's blood was used as a guide to write a special dragon language rune on the 20 dragon head nodes. Ancient dragon language, Ji Yunan stubbornly corrected her. An old player like him was very stubborn about the difference between dragon language and ancient dragon language, because they were two completely different things. Sylvia shrugged her shoulders, but her gaze fell on the formation. She was once again tricked by Ji Yunan, and it would be a lie to say that she was not angry. But as for how much hatred this shadow goddess had, it couldn't be said. After all, she was the younger sister of the god of light and justice, and her position among the gods was extremely special. Not to mention that she was not the culprit. Even if no one framed her, she was not afraid of the god of white ravens behind the metal dragon race. Instead, she was more curious about the formation that Ji Nan had spent so much effort to set up. From the looks of the rune, it seemed to be used for unsealing. As Sylvia expected, as the formation was finally completed, the blood of the metal dragon race started to seep into the ground, and the ground started to collapse. This was not an arrangement that had been dug out. If there was something like a cellar, it would have been discovered by the dragon race long ago. The ground of the valley was clearly a piece of solid soil, but under the effect of the formation, it was forcefully dispersed. However, this was not the full effect of the formation. Following that, not only was the soil expelled, even the space started to collapse. This was the true effect of the laws. As a layer of concealment was removed, the true appearance of the underground was finally revealed. There's actually a hidden world beneath the heavy silver island. Sylvia's voice was filled with bewilderment. She could see what was underneath, and that was why she was especially surprised. Gods had done too many things like hiding a small space, so it was not surprising at all. However, this was not a small space, it was a world, a real world. The laws of space in the world of gods were more stable than those in the heavens, so there were not that many planes that could be traversed at will, and there was no such thing as reincarnation. However, there was no difference between the two. A small space was a small space, highly unstable, and would collapse on its own after 100 years or so. A world was a world, and even after thousands of years, it would not collapse on its own. It would only slowly reproduce life. There was a world hidden beneath the heavy silver island, and it was not a man-made small space. A plane that relies on the existence of the dragon world. How was that formed? Sylvia had never seen such a strange plane in her long life. Ji Nan did not answer immediately. In fact, he did not understand the principle behind it either. From a game's theoretical understanding, he was more willing to believe that the purpose of designing such a scene was just for the item inside, so there could not be a second place like this in the world. However, this did not stop Ji Nan from spouting nonsense. The dragon world was once a god's god kingdom. After the god's fall, the god kingdom gradually developed its own consciousness after a long enough period of time. This is proof. A god kingdom actually has its own consciousness. Sylvia was shocked by this earth-shattering truth, and subconsciously repeated it. Even though logic told her that such a thing could not possibly exist, Ji Nan had done too many things that she could not help but believe it. He even knew where the mirror god was, and he had killed her with his own hands. It did not seem strange that a god kingdom could develop its own consciousness. Moreover, only a god kingdom of a fallen god would be like this. This was not impossible. After all, at the level of a god, all sorts of strange things could not be imagined by ordinary gods. Chapter 374. Speaking nonsense was one of Ji Nan's habits. In fact, all veteran players had this habit. Since there were too many hidden settings and Easter eggs in the game, and the game officials were unwilling to reveal them all, they could only let the players explore them bit by bit. Speaking to the NPCs that they didn't understand might trigger a special mechanism that would lead to unexpected rewards. Of course, this was purely a lucky draw, and it didn't matter if he got nothing. Ji Nan ignored Sylvia, who was deep in thought, and strode into the world that had been revealed. There weren't many decorations in the world under the valley of the heavy silver island. In fact, this world was pitifully small, only the size of a room. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for such a small world to exist. Even small spaces were rarely this small. But the truth was right in front of him. In front of Ji Nan, there was a crystal-clear bead that emitted a faint light. If it wasn't floating in the air, it wouldn't look special at all. But after Sylvia came down, she immediately understood the reason for all this. The world is inside. She pointed at the bead in disbelief. Inside the bead was the shape of an entire world. That's right. This is the crystallization of the consciousness of the God Kingdom. Ji Nan nodded seriously and then reached out to take the bead, and the light in the ground dimmed instantly. Are you crazy? Sylvia was about to go crazy. Ji Nan actually took such a precious thing. Anyone would have to study it. Ignoring her, Ji Nan held the bead in his hand and tried to connect it to his god kingdom, trying to stuff it inside. He didn't know what the bead was, but Ji Nan was very clear about its use. In the game, the scientific name of this thing was God Kingdom Pearl, and it could be used to absorb and store a god kingdom. The greatest use of the God Kingdom Pearl was actually for the players to breed and slaughter the enemy's god kingdom. Now that Ji Nan wanted to use it to store his god kingdom, it wasn't a very reliable use. Normally, no one would do such a thing, because once the god nation was placed in the orb, it would no longer be able to provide support from the astral world. It was equivalent to cutting off one's arms. More importantly, Ji Nan's divine kingdom was located in the heavenly world. Although it was possible to forcefully communicate with it, whether it could be placed in the pearl was another matter. Under Sylvia's gaze, fine beads of sweat gradually appeared on Ji Nan's forehead. In the end, he sighed helplessly. After much effort, he tried to establish contact with the god nation several times, but every time he tried to store the god nation in the orb, the connection would be instantly cut off. Looks like it won't work. I can only try again after returning to the all heavens. Ji Nan shook his head and kept the pearl. Fortunately, he had expected this, so he wasn't disappointed. After all, he was only here to give it a try. The operation in the Pantheon world would still have to wait for the seedlings of the player army to be sent over. The world of heavens. Sir, the space-time crystal is ready. All Jew chased everyone out and spoke to the air in a trembling voice. There was a huge box of space-time crystal in front of him. The Clear River realm was really efficient. Not bad. The sage's body appeared and nodded in satisfaction. All Jew saw Ji Nan put away the space-time crystal one by one, and mustered up his courage to say, "Sir, Miss Zhongdai is my lord's daughter after all. If you're interested in taking her in as your subordinate, why don't? I'll look for you next time if I need anything," Ji Nan said as he patted All Jew's shoulder after he finished counting the space-time crystal. With that, the sage's body disappeared instantly. He didn't care about Zhongdai at all. Whether Zhong Qinghe wanted to keep her or find someone to take her away, Ji Nan didn't really care. The real player army would definitely be the oracles under his absolute control. Zhongdai didn't have the right to enter. If not for the fact that the divine kingdom was no longer hidden, she wouldn't even have the right to enter. In the flowering divine kingdom, Ji Nan slowly opened his eyes, a hint of satisfaction flashing in them. The space-time crystal was ready. All he had to do was wait for the seedlings to be transported over, and then he could let them walk the path of the players one by one. Sylvia was sitting in front of Ji Nan, glaring at him. "Where's the bead?" Sylvia stared at Ji Nan and asked. "What's the matter?" Ji Nan raised his eyebrows. "I've asked my brother. It's impossible for a divine kingdom to give birth to a consciousness. It's even more impossible for a chief god to do so than a regular god. At the level of a chief god, it actually meant that they would leave the divine kingdom and return to their own bodies. According to the saying of the heavenly worlds, a cultivator's body was one with the great Tao, and from then on, they were the embodiment of the rules. The astral realm wasn't as important as before. Therefore, what Ji Nan said earlier was just to take advantage of Sylvia's lack of understanding of the chief gods. Her brother, Austin, wouldn't believe it. "Oh, is there anything else?" Ji Nan was exposed, but he didn't say anything else. Hence, the scene fell silent. Sylvia didn't say anything, and Ji Nan didn't say anything else either. "Actually, Sylvia is here to ask for your help with something." In the end, a voice rang out beside the two of them, and Taoist Master Spirit Sun's figure slowly appeared. The Daoist had a smile on his face and looked very kind. Taoist Master Spirit Sun could be considered half an expert in the Pantheon realm, so he was rather familiar with the situation here. He just so happened to be here when Ji Nan entered the Divine God Association. His words didn't surprise Ji Nan. Sylvia was a rather idle god, but it wasn't as if she had nothing to do. She had come to look for Ji Nan, of course, not just to follow him to the Dragon Realm. She must have some ulterior motives. However, too many accidents had happened along the way, so she didn't have the time to speak. It's a duel related to the rules. With Taoist Master Spirit's son laying the groundwork, Sylvia finally had the nerve to speak. I'll be representing Umbra, but my opponent might be very strong, so I hope you can take my place. A hint of understanding flashed in Ji Yunan's eyes. He seemed to have understood what Sylvia wanted to participate in. That incident was a well-known event in the game. Since we're both members of the same organization, it's not a problem for me to help, Ji Yunan said straightforwardly. As for the reward, he turned to look at Taoist Master Spirit Sunday. I have a batch of people to transport here. Do you want your people to help? Taoist Master Spirit Sun said with a smile, of course, it's nothing. Hey, you actually want a reward? Sylvia, who had been tricked by Ji Yunan a few times, was immediately displeased. I've already taken the blame for you. Chapter 375. Asking Taoist Master Spirit Sun's Shenqing realm to send a group of people to the Pantheon world was not a big deal, especially when Ji Yunan already had the spacetime crystal ready. Dragon square root alter square root book square root net. However, when players were doing quests, they would take advantage of the situation as much as they could, regardless of whether it was embarrassing. Sylvia left resentfully. After Taoist Master Spirit Sun asked who Ji Yunan wanted to send and agreed on a meeting place, he too disappeared. Ji Yunan looked at his back as he left and pondered a little more. The Society of Heavenly Gods was an organization that spanned across two worlds, so its existence must be multifaceted. For Shueren, Lorenza, and the others, what they wanted was an unobstructed path to the other world, which would make it easier for them to reach the Tao. However, for people like Taoist Master Spirit Yang and Sylvia, it was still too early for them to consider this. Not everyone would go straight to the point of convergence. There were many celestial lords and gods who indulged in sensual pleasures in this world. Otherwise, why would there be so many illegitimate children of the gods? Taoist Master Spirit Sun did not look like someone who indulged in pleasure, but he had been to the Pantheon world many times and seemed to have something to manage here. However, Ji Yunan shook his head. What Taoist Master Spirit Sun thought had nothing to do with him. What was more important at the moment was the matter of Sylvia's visit. The event settings in the Demon God game were very interesting. Most of the events were route-like. The time of the events in the game was different every week, and even the details were slightly different. Only the main event would be the same, which gave the players more fun. Of course, Ji Yunan hoped that there was no such fun at the moment. What Sylvia needed Ji Yunan's help with, Ji Yunan knew without her asking. The Dark Shadow Sect. In the Pantheon world, there was a sect with believers in many planes, even in the main planes. That was the Dark Shadow Sect. The Dark Shadow Sect was a relatively small sect, as it did not belong to any particular god. Instead, it was a sect formed by three gods. The goddess of shadow, Sylvia, the god of thieves, Serves, and the sage of Deadwood, Eden, were the founders of the Dark Shadow Sect. The followers of the sect mainly came from the three of them. The three of them worked together to protect this sect and obtain faith from it. This was one of the better ways for weak gods to harvest faith. After all, if any of them were to run their own churches, they would not be able to reach this level. However, at a certain point in time, the Shadow Church would face the attack of another church, or rather, face the challenge of a powerful god. When Sylvia came to Ji Yunan's residence again, she brought with her the information of a certain god. Shadow Sword Saint Zhongbuoluan, this is our opponent this time, Sylvia said solemnly as she pointed at the information on the paper. Ji Yunan was not surprised, because no matter how the crisis of the Dark Shadow Sect changed, the final boss was always the same. It was always Zhongbuoluan. The conflict between the two was very simple, and that was the battle of faith. The name Shadow of the Dark Shadow Sect was a combination of the laws of Sylvia and the other two gods. Unfortunately, the Shadow Sword Saint's origin law was also shadow. Under such circumstances, a portion of Zhongbuoluan's believers would naturally be taken away by the Dark Shadow Sect, and the Sword Saint was naturally unwilling. It was not that Sylvia and the other two wanted to take advantage of him, but when the Dark Shadow Sect was established, there was no such person as Zhongbuoluan. The Shadow Sword Saint was a god that had only risen in the past 10,000 years. In just a few thousand years, His strength had advanced to the rank 8 stage, and he could be considered a genius. It was also because he had confidence in his own strength that he started to make things difficult for the Dark Shadow sect, bullying a sect that only had 2 rank 7 and 1 rank 6. Of course, he did not want to completely destroy the Dark Shadow sect. Although the alliance of the 3 veteran gods was not very strong, they had many friends, and they were not afraid of anyone in an all-out war. Zhongbuluan's goal this time was only to change the name of the Dark Shadow sect, so that he would not lose the believers that he was supposed to enjoy. He suggested a fair battle with the 3 gods of the Dark Shadow sect, and the winner would be given the name Shadow. Zhongbuluan, at least he knows when to advance and when to retreat, Ji Yunan commented. If the Sword Saint dared to force it, there would be many people who would be willing to suck up to the God of Light. On the contrary, he limited the matter to a battle of faith, which made it difficult for the friends of Sylvia and the others to intervene. Of course, they could get help from others when it came to the survival of the sect, but if they had to rely on outsiders to fight for faith, the loss of believers would be very serious. But if we change the name of the sect, the loss of believers will be equally serious. Sylvia sounded a little distressed. That was the dilemma they were facing now. If a sect that had been operating for tens of thousands of years were to change its name, it would definitely cause a loss of believers. Getting help from outsiders was actually not much different from changing the name. Then how can I help you? Ji Yunan asked after some thought. You can fight on my behalf. We're both using the Y-Shadow rule anyway. Zhongbuluan has never seen me before, so there's no reason for him to recognize me. I might not only use Y-Shadow to fight, but what if he recognizes me? Then I'll say that you're a new member of the Dark Shadow sect. Sylvia had obviously thought of a way out. Even if you really want to join, I believe the 2 of them won't reject you. Ji Yunan could not help but smile. Who said that Sylvia was naive? When it came to her own interests, she was not slow at all. Joining the Dark Shadow sect in name or in reality was the way things were handled in the game. As long as a player's rule was related to the Dark Shadow sect, and they were familiar enough with one of the 3 gods, it was possible to trigger the Dark Shadow sect event. The way for players to get involved was to temporarily join the Dark Shadow sect as a god, and it was up to the player to decide whether or not to leave. Got it. Ji Yunan nodded. What's the time and place for your duel? The word duel made Sylvia's mouth twitch, but she still relayed the information to Ji Yunan in the end. She then quickly bid farewell and went back to communicate with the other 2 gods. The possibility of a new god joining the sect was not a small matter, after all. Of course, Ji Yunan was not interested in conviction. The reason he was interested in participating in this matter was actually because of Zhongbuluan. This coincided with what Ji Yunan wanted to do next. He wanted to build a player army, so it was inevitable that he would have to deal a blow to Zhongbuluan. That was because only when players participated in the Dark Shadow sect event and successfully defeated Zhongbuluan would the Shadow Swordmaster learn from his painful experience and keep his promise to give up the name Shadow and change his name to Phantom Swordmaster. That was also the only way to unlock the hidden class Phantom Swordmaster. Hence, Ji Yunan paused for a moment, then said, I'll go with you. Div class equals other_links download address phone reading for convenience of reading next time. You can bookmark this time. Chapter 415 Chapter 4. Chapter 376. The Phantom Sword Sage was a very powerful path, but also a very difficult one. Dragon altar book net Longtanshu. First of all, this was a path that could be taken after the first class advancement, which was equivalent to the level of gods in the game. There was no doubt about its power. In other words, the upper limit of this path was extremely high. It could be used all the way to the second class advancement before players would need to return to the evil god path. Secondly, the player's participation in the Shadow Sect incident was equivalent to negating Zhongbuluan's voice. One could imagine how difficult it would be to take the job through normal means. Moreover, since Zhongbuluan was the founder of this path, killing him would not give him anything like an inheritance. Some crazy philatelic players would even self-destruct in order to experience the power of the Phantom Sword Sage. After defeating Zhongbuluan, they would decisively destroy their evil god bodies and be reborn in the evil god's temple. Finally, They would change their appearance and take on the phantom sword sage job. Ji Nan had experienced this himself, but he was not crazy enough to self-destruct. After trying several methods to take on the shadow sword sage job, he decisively chose to give up. It was simple now. All he had to do was pull some people from the heavenly worlds over and let them attempt the job. However, what Ji Nan did not expect was that his actions would cause this incident to go beyond his expectations. In Sylvia's Y-Shadow Holy Kingdom, two figures slowly appeared. One of them was a skinny old man with a hunched back. He was Eden, the withered tree sage. Legend had it that Eden was a member of the tree shepherds and was the only god among them. However, the reason he became a god was that he had awakened an extremely special rule after being abandoned by his tribe. The other person was tall and handsome. His every move was gentle and polite, a perfect example of a gentleman. It was hard to imagine that this person was the legendary god of thieves. He was the complete opposite of the shifty-eyed image that most people had in mind. The one who seems the least likely is usually the real criminal. Ji Nan understood this very well, as the three gods of crime were all like that when it came to their image. After the two arrived, they were not in a hurry to greet Sylvia. Instead, their gazes landed on Ji Nan. "Welcome, my friends." Sylvia led the two into the castle and introduced Ji Nan. "This is Mr. Ji Nan from the heavenly world." "I see." A smile of understanding appeared on Sage Witheredwood's old face. The other person in charge of Y-Shadow has never been known to anyone. This is a bit strange. When Sylvia informed the two of them to come over, she had naturally told them about the matter. He was explaining their previous actions. Ji Nan nodded lightly and didn't say anything else. "The god of thieves, serves, said, is His Excellency Ji Nan going to fight in Sylvia's place? Since you don't mind joining the Dark Shadow sect, why don't you participate in this matter with your own identity?" Chamberlain's reputation was so great that Eden and Sevis were actually a little lacking in confidence. After all, the three of them did not follow the maxim of direct combat, while their opponent was the exact opposite. The title of Sword Sage was built on mountains of corpses and seas of blood. If Ji Nan were to participate in this matter with his own identity, it would mean that the four of them could fight at the same time. Their chances of winning would be higher no matter what. "Actually, there's no difference," Ji Nan said after some consideration. Sylvia's expression darkened again. When Ji Nan noticed that, he turned his head and said seriously, "Don't misunderstand, I'm not targeting you." "Ahem." Sage Witheredwood coughed lightly to ease the awkwardness. "Mr. Ji Nan is very confident. Then, can you show us?" Whether it was replacing Sylvia or joining the Dark Shadow sect, it was necessary to test Ji Nan's strength. That was also the main purpose of their visit. If Ji Nan were to join the Dark Shadow sect, his strength would determine how the benefits would be distributed internally. Of course. Ji Nan smiled, and the Y-Shadow under his feet began to gather. "Which one of you will go first?" The god of thieves and Sage Witheredwood looked at each other. Since it was just a test, it would be enough for one of them to make a move. It did not matter who would go first. So, Sage Witheredwood waved his hand gently, and withered branches gradually grew out from the cracks of Sylvia's castle and quickly crawled toward Ji Nan. These withered branches were charred black as if they had been burned by fire, but they were full of vitality and looked extremely strange. In the blink of an eye, the withered branches had already coiled themselves and formed a huge withered wood giant, which smashed toward Ji Nan with a heavy punch. Usually, Ji Nan would not even blink and let the giant hit him. But this time, he used the power of Y-Shadow. The Y-Shadow under Ji Nan's feet suddenly rose and turned into countless tentacles that rushed toward the withered wood giant. They quickly entered the giant's body and shuttled between the gaps of the withered wood. The next moment, the entire withered wood giant was disassembled, and each withered branch had a Y-Shadow attached to it. The smile on Eden's face stiffened. He began to activate his divine power, but it did not affect the withered branches in the slightest. He knew what this meant. It was a complete suppression. Chamberlain was a very strict person. Even though he was extremely confident in himself, and even if it was 1 against 3, he was confident that he could suppress the three gods. However, He did not stop collecting information about the three enemies. There was a lot of information about the god of thieves and sage withered wood, but there was little news about Sylvia. This mysterious goddess's actions were rarely discovered. But this time, the news about Sylvia was known by everyone. Many people had already determined that the tragedy on the Dragon Realm's Heavy Silver Island was Sylvia's doing. After all, she had indeed appeared there. But Chamberlain did not believe it. That was because Chamberlain was also a person with a wide range of friends. He had many friends, most of whom were battle maniacs, such as Carina. Are you saying that there is a strange god beside Sylvia? Chamberlain touched the stubble on his chin and said thoughtfully, a strange god with a very hard fist. Carina emphasized. She also touched the back of her head, which was still aching. And I can tell that his fundamental law is Y-shadow. That was what confused them the most. They had never heard of the other god whose fundamental law was Y-shadow. Chamberlain could not help but sigh. Sylvia showed up with a strange god at this time. It seems that there will be more obstacles for me to win the title of Shadow. You mean that person will help? Carina was pleasantly surprised. That's great. Div class equals other underscore links download address mobile reading for the convenience of reading next time. You can bookmark this time. Chapter 416, Introduction. Chapter 377. The Heavenly Realms. In a frontline plane, a few youths were slowly boarding a flying vessel in a neat formation. Standing in front of them was Lan Sai. Lord Lan Sai, everything has been arranged. Once you arrive in the Pantheon world, someone will bring you to Lord Jiunan's side, a Taoist priest beside Lan Sai said with a smile. Which plane is it in? Lan Sai nodded. The flowering divine nation. On the flying vessel, Lan Sai was still gazing at the scenery on both sides of her, lost in thought for a moment. Jiunan wanted to transport a batch of seedlings to the Pantheon world. As one of the managers of the divine nation, Lan Sai had to be the one to lead the team. This was because these seedlings who had grown up in the divine nation or were gathered from outside were initially managed by Lan Sai and Yang Xiaoxiao. Only the two of them had enough prestige among these people. There were a total of 9 seedlings heading to the Pantheon world this time, each of them the cream of the crop. Each of them had reached their current position by stepping on corpses. Ordinary people could not suppress them. As for Yang Xiaoxiao, she was related to the divine nation's origin. As she cultivated over the years, in Lan Sai's words, she became less and less human. In short, she was the only one who could lead the team. However, Lan Sai did not know at first that she was going to the flowering divine nation. That was her hometown, the place where she had grown up. Even though so many years had passed, she was no longer the ignorant girl from back then. The number of people who had died at her hands was probably more than what she had seen in the flowering divine nation. Lord Lan Sai. Liang Ruxin appeared by Lan Sai's side. When he saw that her side profile was unexpectedly a bit melancholy, he thought that he was mistaken. Lan Sai turned around. Her expression was completely restrained, and she said calmly, among the 9 of you, you have the greatest potential, and your background is clear. When you reach the Lord's side, you must perform well. After saying this, she took a deep look at Liang Ruxin. I believe that you are a smart person. Of course. Liang Ruxin revealed a faint smile. Over the past few days, the people around me have told me the most. That person's existence is supreme, and no one can resist it. Lan Sai nodded. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Liang Ruxin say, but I feel that in this world, there is always an existence as supreme as that one. While saying this, Liang Ruxin also closely stared at Lan Sai. Before meeting that person, this might be his only chance to understand him. To Liang Ruxin's surprise, Lan Sai didn't show any anger or annoyance after being offended. She just smiled sarcastically. If you are an ambitious person, then following the Lord is your best choice. When Lan Sai led the group to see Jiunan, he was sitting with his legs crossed, without any image to speak of, and in his hand was a deck of cards full of patterns. Opposite him was Sylvia, who was scratching her head. She was also holding a deck of patterned cards, but there weren't many of them left. What they were playing was called black cards, a rather popular card game in the Pantheon world. It was used to simulate the playstyle of a Divine Kingdom war. This card game was also rather popular among the players. Later on, there was even a dedicated game client, independent from the Demon God game. There weren't many gods who liked to play cards, and the idol Sylvia just happened to be one of them. Coincidentally, she bumped into the bored Ji Nan, and a huge battle ensued. After all, there was still some time before the duel. In the end, the shadow goddess lost all 10 battles, and didn't even get to see Ji Nan's trump card. Seeing that she was about to lose again, Sylvia saw that Lan Sai had brought people over. She didn't care if they knew each other, and directly threw the cards in her hand away. She stood up and said, "You have a guest, I'll be leaving first." After saying that, her figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. This time, even Ji Nan couldn't catch her. After all, she was the shadow goddess, and had a way of escaping. Ji Nan let out a mocking smile, then picked up the cards she had thrown away and put them back out of the field. He then restored the field to its original state. The next time she came, she'd better be prepared to receive her 11th consecutive defeat. Ji Nan thought for a moment, and took a look at the cards in Sylvia's hand. Liang Ruxin followed behind Lan Sai, his eyebrows lowered. He had never been one to judge a book by its cover, and had seen many unruly and ambitious people. Of course, he wouldn't look down on this person before him because of some small matter. "My lord, it's the 9 of them," Lan Sai said meticulously, pretending not to see the scene. "All right." Ji Nan also put down the cards in his hand, and nodded. "It's not easy for you to come back. Did you go see Lorenza?" Lan Sai was slightly taken aback. She thought that Ji Nan would avoid this topic, but she immediately shook her head, a hint of helplessness in her eyes. "That person probably doesn't remember me, or maybe she never knew me. When Lan Sai left back then, Lorenza was already a level 10 great god. How many gods' messengers were there in her divine kingdom? Lan Sai couldn't even be considered gods' messengers. They could only be regarded as Lorenza's fanatics, and the gods wouldn't remember their names. Back then, they had only come to the heavenly planes for the most basic water divine spark. It might have seemed powerful back then, but in reality, in Lorenza's eyes, was it worth so much effort? If she really wanted a divine spark, she could just kill an enemy god. So, the one who sent Lan Sai was Lorenza's god's messenger, and her strength might not even be comparable to the current Lan Sai. Still, we should go back and take a look. Maybe we can trigger something. Maybe we can run into someone we know, Ji Nan said with a smile. Lan Sai's heart trembled slightly, but she still nodded. Yes. After Lan Sai left, Ji Nan looked at the 9 people he had brought with him. "You've all been sent to small planes to carry out missions before, right? I'll need you to do the same in the future." After a pause, Ji Nan said, "Work for me and complete the missions I give you. As a reward, you will receive power." After a moment of silence, one of them finally spoke. It was a young man. "Do we have the right to refuse?" "Of course," Ji Nan said generously. "But that will make me unhappy, and when I'm unhappy, I'll kill the person who makes me unhappy." The young man fell silent. A girl beside him couldn't help but sneer. "So you still don't have the right to refuse?" Chapter 378. Of the 9 people he had brought with him, the boy and the girl were the youngest and the most talented. Young people had the characteristics of young people. They weren't as lethargic as the others, who didn't even speak. For the sake of their courage, Ji Nan was willing to impart some life experiences to them. The boy thought for a long time, then looked at Ji Nan and said, "If I can beat you one day, will you let me go?" "If you can beat me, then it won't be a matter of whether I let you go or not, but the other way around." The boy nodded thoughtfully. Then, he no longer looked young and inexperienced. He swung his sleeves and said like a bandit, "I'll do it. What's your name? What did you do before?" Ji Nan glanced at him and asked. "And Tianxing, the bandit." The bandit, and Tianxing, was 14 years old this year. This was something Ji Nan had just learned. However, he didn't mind using child labor. As long as he could do his job well, he wouldn't mind using a 4-year-old. At this time, the 9 people were no longer in front of Ji Nan. Instead, They were all in a room, skimming through a pile of information. This information was compiled by Ji Yunan recently. It was information about the players' routes. Routes were very important. Rather than letting Ji Yunan learn about them one by one, it was better to let them make their own choices first. For the sake of confidentiality, they were not allowed to leave the room unless they had chosen the route they wanted to take. After choosing the route, they had to explain their characteristics and reasons for choosing the route. Finally, Ji Yunan would look through the information and guide them to complete the job. To Ji Yunan's surprise, the first person to come out to see him wasn't Tiansheng, but the girl. "I'm Xie Yun, sir." Perhaps Ji Yunan's words were effective, but Xie Yun's attitude was clearly better, and her voice sounded crisper. "What route did you choose?" "Firearms expert." Ji Yunan couldn't help but smile. He took the information from Xie Yun's hands and said, "This is not a route an ordinary person would choose. Gunner specialist was a very interesting route. He could use energy to imitate guns and suppress them with pure firepower. However, this also meant that the upper limit of this route was not high. Its range of application was roughly between the 3rd to the 6th stage. At Tier 7 and above, however, the gun expert's abilities would be rendered useless. Players would still have to rely on the evil god's body and their own laws to fight. On the other hand, none of the people Ji Yunan had chosen were from the evil god's temple. This meant that if Xie Yun chose the path of a cannon specialist, her combat strength would at most be at the Type 7 level. Unless she changed her route and started all over again. Of course, to Xie Yun, it was already completely acceptable for her to be able to reach the 7th rank. After all, not everyone was a Dao integration stage super mighty figure. "Have you ever seen a gun?" Ji Yunan thought for a moment and asked. "Of course." Xie Yun nodded. "I've been to a technological dimension before. The development of firearms there is very high." As she said this, Xie Yun's eyes flickered. Ji Yunan could almost imagine what it would be like for a young girl who had grown up in a metaphysical dimension to see firearms for the first time. For low-level players, firearms were definitely practical and flashy. However, for higher-level players, they were no longer useful. For example, with the strength of Ji Yunan's current body, he would not even be affected by a nuclear explosion. Regardless of whether it was the heat, the shockwave, or the radiation, none of them could hurt him. "Then, let's give it a try," Ji Yunan said as he wrote down a message and handed it to Xie Yun. When the day of the battle between the Dark Shadow Sect and Zhongbuluan arrived, the 9 people that Lan Sai had brought with him had all been sent out. They went to their respective destinations, attempted to complete the route missions, and chose the route they wanted. For the time being, no one chose the Phantom Sword Sage route. However, Ji Yunan was not in a hurry. Out of 9 people, it would be good if even half of them could successfully become Phantom Sword Sages. The player route was not that easy to become. Even normal players had a high chance of failing, let alone these NPCs who had no gaming experience and were only average in strength. "Hey, it's time to go." Sylvia was already familiar with Ji Yunan, and she did not seem to be polite at all. "I hope that when you face Zhongbuluan, you won't be beaten to the ground with a sword. My strength is as reliable as my card skills," Ji Yunan said with a smile. "If everything goes well, you will welcome your 50th consecutive defeat in the afternoon. You really are not a gentleman at all. You will never be favored by a lady." Sylvia curled her lips and snorted. The location of the god's duel was also very special. In order not to affect mortals, and mainly to not affect their own reputation, they would usually meet in a deserted dimension that was rarely visited by humans. It was the same this time. When Ji Yunan arrived, Sevis and Eden were already waiting. "Your Excellency Ji Yunan, I recently received a piece of news," the extraordinarily handsome god of thieves said. "Zhongbuluan might have a helper too." Sylvia frowned. "Are the helpers that he found qualified to interfere in our battle?" If anyone could intervene, then Sylvia could find too many helpers, and she would not have to find the annoying Ji Yunan. "Sylvia." A slightly rough female voice came from the sky, and Sylvia's face immediately turned blue. The Valkyrie with the golden spear in her hand descended and pointed the spear at Ji Yunan. Without even raising his head, Ji Yunan blocked the golden spear with his hand. However, the spear did not even leave a mark on his hand. Karina, this is the fight between the Dark Shadow Sect and Jongbuluan. Are you sure you want to intervene? Sylvia's voice sounded a bit cold. If Karina intervened, they would be the real enemy. I'm just here for this guy. Karina was not stupid. She pointed the spear at Ji Yunan and said, he beat me up. Am I not allowed to take revenge? Sylvia couldn't help but be furious. What's the difference between seeking revenge from him and helping Boluan Jong? Eden and Sevis, on the other hand, had a bitter smile on their faces. Unlike Sylvia, they did not have a good brother. Based on their previous contact with Karina, Lucien knew that Karina was not a reasonable person. I don't care. Karina's next words came out of her mouth. As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't give Sylvia a chance to speak and pierced his spear towards Ji Yunan. The golden spear was shining brightly. Clearly, Karina had activated the law of her body, which was much more powerful than the previous attack. Everyone's eyes fell on Ji Yunan, wondering how he would deal with it. However, Ji Yunan did not respond. The spear pierced into Ji Yunan's chest and came out from his back, leaving a horrible bloody wound. Sylvia's eyes widened. Even Karina herself did not expect that her opponent, who could knock her out, would be so weak. However, the next second, she realized that something was wrong. Ji Yunan's chest was pierced by her, but there was a creepy smile on his face. She could not pull back her spear, and it was stuck by Ji Yunan. When the spear pierced into Ji Yunan's body, her law of nature was temporarily suppressed. Meanwhile, Ji Yunan raised his hand and grabbed the spear. Today, let me teach you a lesson. Ji Yunan's voice was still as calm as usual, which made Sylvia feel a bit relieved. Even the goddess of combat has a weakness. What weakness? Karina's words came out faster than anyone else's. She felt that she had reached the peak of her current level, and her divine body was almost perfect. It was hard for her to improve further. Her divine body was indeed perfect, and even Ji Yunan could not find a way to kill her. However, it was only a perfect divine body. Your attack power is too weak, Ji Yunan said straightforwardly. Otherwise, why would you ask the god of craftsmanship to make this spear? As Ji Yunan spoke, he pointed at the golden spear that had pierced through his body and was caught by him with one hand. While Karina was still in a daze, Ji Yunan had already raised his other hand and smashed on the spear. Chapter 379. When Jongbuluan arrived, he saw such a scene. Karina was holding a broken spear in her hand, and Ji Yunan was casually pulling out the other half of the spear from his chest and throwing it on the ground. Jongbuluan, you're here. Let's get started. Ji Yunan did not take Karina seriously at all. Karina threw a punch at Ji Yunan angrily, but Ji Yunan did not even bother to move. He just let her hit his shoulder, and then, there was nothing. Players could always find the weakness of any NPCs, even Karina, the hidden main character of the game. After all, even the body of an evil god had its own bias, which depended on the skills that the players had chosen before their first-class advancement. For example, Ji Yunan focused on speed and recovery. His attack and defense were only at the average level of a player. Karina, on the other hand, was called the goddess of combat. In fact, her law should be related to defense, which provided her amazing resistance. Even Ji Yunan could hardly hurt her, let alone kill her. On the other hand, be it speed or attack power, she was far from Ji Yunan's level. When the spear that provided most of her damage was broken, she lost her best weapon. Karina, you should stay out of this, Boluan Jong said to Karina in a serious tone. After all, Karina could only attack Ji Yunan, but Ji Yunan could ignore her attacks. Of course, if she were to forcefully make a move, there would be some restraining effect, but the scene would be too ugly, as if this Valkyrie was pestering them endlessly. Perhaps the goddess herself did not care, but Jongbuluan did not want to do that. He was not a sinister villain. Originally, he only wanted to fight for the title of Shadow that should have belonged to him. He did not want to become a mortal enemy of the three gods. Karina stood aside, and the Shadow cult sent Ji Yunan and the other two to fight. Since Jongbuluan was following the rules, the four of them did not gang up on Jongbuluan. After this battle, the world will only have the name Shadow. Buluan slowly unsheathed his sword from his waist and said, "If I lose, I'll change my name to Phantom." The Shadow Sword Sage was indeed an upright person. He did not rely on his tyrannical strength to challenge the Shadow Sword Sage again and again. Even though Sylvia had found Ji Nan as an external aid for this challenge. Hence, Sylvia was the one who felt a little embarrassed. She took the initiative to say, "Why don't?" "Shut up," Ji Nan quickly interrupted. "The light gods are wasting time. If you want to fight, hurry up and fight." Both Buluan and Sylvia belonged to the God of Light system, and only they would play this kind of game when it came to fighting for faith. Just look at Sevis and Eden from the Darkness God system. One of them is one of the 3 sin gods, while the other was a fallen tree shepherd. Why would they be so modest at a time like this? One of them smiled more sinisterly than the other. Sylvia's words were silenced by Ji Nan's "shut up." She could only glare at him fiercely. Buluan was completely unaffected. The sword in his hand was already pointing straight at the God of Thieves. The Shadow Sword Sage's tactical intentions were very clear. He wanted to break through Sevis's weakest point first, and then free up his hands to deal with the other 2. There were only 2 strategies when fighting with the few. Either he eliminated the weakest first, or he eliminated the strongest first. Ji Nan had used his actions to prove that he was not that easy to eliminate. Hence, Sevis became the best target. Sevis and Eden reacted extremely quickly. In fact, the 2 of them had a good relationship, and it was not the first time they had cooperated in battle. The tall and handsome God of Thieves did not say a word. His figure immediately disappeared into thin air, and the countless withered branches from the deadwood sage quickly collided with Buluan's sword. The swordsmanship of the world of gods was completely different from the swordsmanship of the heavens. There was no need for abstruse things like sword will or the heart of the sword here, only extreme speed. Buluan's sword was as fast as lightning, leaving behind a series of afterimages in the air. At the same time that the deadwood sage attacked, 6 figures appeared beside Eden. This was a diversion. The old Eden's eyes widened. It was too late for him to mobilize the withered branches again. His body rapidly swelled up, and his skin turned black inch by inch, rapidly turning into withered wood. This rank 7 god had revealed his true form in the blink of an eye. It was clear how much pressure the Shadow Sword Sage was exerting on him. The 6 afterimages around him were Buluan's famous swordsmanship. All 6 of them were real, and each brought about astonishing damage. However, just as the 6 afterimages attacked, a fist descended from the sky and struck one of them. The 6 afterimages paused at the same time, and then turned their swords in unison, heading straight for the Ji Nan who had appeared. Ji Nan did not even spare them a glance, allowing the 6 swords to stab into his body. His fist still struck the enemy. The other 5 shadows disappeared at the same time, leaving only the one in front of Ji Nan. It was Buluan himself, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Even a rank 8 god would not be able to take a direct hit from Ji Nan. Not everyone was as abnormal as Karina. "You seem to know me very well." Buluan did not care about the injuries on his body, and only looked at Ji Nan strangely. His shadow swordsmanship had been famous for many years, but the number of people who truly understood it could be counted on one hand. Ji Nan was obviously not one of them. Every one of them is real, but there's always one that's more real, isn't there? Ji Nan revealed a strange smile, and then revealed the secret of this swordsmanship with a single sentence. This sentence was said by Buluan himself, but it had to be said after he became the Phantom Sword Saint. Ji Nan had borrowed it in advance. On the other hand, the fact that he could find Buluan's real body did not have much to do with whether it was real or not. He was just trying his luck. After all, one of the 6 shadows had to be real. If the first one was not real, he would attack the next one without hesitation. He did not care about Eden's life or death. Buluan did not know any of this. His eyes were slightly solemn, and Ji Nan became even more mysterious in his eyes. He did not want to take another punch, so he gave up on the shadow swordsmanship. His body began to turn into a shadow and wander in the gaps of space. The next moment, the tip of the sword suddenly appeared and directly pierced into the heart of Eden's tree. The Deadwood Sage did not even have time to react and was hit by the sword. There was a touch of ruthlessness in his eyes, and he suddenly grabbed the sword with both hands. The sword was instantly pulled out, and Eden's hands were directly cut off. However, a muffled groan came from the side. Sevis and Jongboluan appeared at the same time. Chapter 380. This was the coordination that Eden and Sevis had come up with. If there was no Ji-Yunan, then their battle would be with Deadwood Sage as the main tank, the god of thieves waiting for an opportunity to deal damage, and the shadow goddess restraining from the side. But it had to be said that their efficiency was very low. It would probably be a long process to stab Jongboluan to death after suffering the injury from Sevis' dagger, and it was hard to say how long Deadwood Sage would be able to last. And Jongboluan's misfortune lay in the fact that there was a Ji-Yunan here. The moment he appeared, Ji-Yunan had already gone all out. The shadow sword fell down, forcing Jongboluan to raise his sword to meet the attack. Both of them were extremely fast, and they exchanged hundreds of blows in an instant. Ji-Yunan's every strike was aimed at his opponent's vitals, but they were all blocked by Jongboluan. The name of the Sword Saint was well deserved. Ji-Yunan spread his hands helplessly. In the middle and late stages of the game, players would face this situation. The NPC's control was already quite strong, and it was not inferior to the intensity of PvP. However, it was useless. Just when Jongboluan thought he could heave a sigh of relief, Ji-Yunan abruptly stood up to meet the attack. He used his stomach to eat his opponent's long sword, and then stabbed forward unhurriedly. The scene of being stuck by Ji-Yunan was not as easy to recover as it was with Eden. Jongboluan's mouth twitched slightly, and he had no choice but to jump, trying to escape from Ji-Yunan's attack in midair. But after he dodged Ji-Yunan's shadow sword, there was no more space for him to move. So Ji-Yunan slammed his head into Jongboluan's forehead without thinking, and a horrifying sound was heard. A moment later, the shadow sword saint held his sword with one hand and covered his forehead with the other, fresh blood flowing down like it was free. Jongboluan was a purebred human, and even though he had become a god, his blood was still bright red, but now he looked a little miserable. A dignified sword saint was actually defeated by Ji-Yunan in such a gangster fight. In the two exchanges, Jongboluan was at a disadvantage. This was not because he was weaker than Ji-Yunan, but because he had adopted a more risky tactic in order to win, but it was completely seen through by Ji-Yunan. The injured Jongboluan was still fighting with all his might. People who could get to this point would not lack perseverance and persistence. In terms of willpower, Ji-Yunan was probably not as good as his opponent, but the problem was that he did not need to be tested at all. Any injury that Ji-Yunan suffered would be healed in an extremely short period of time, and he didn't have to waste time thinking about how to fight. All that Ji-Yunan needed to do was to stab his sword into Jongboluan's body. After a while, Ji-Yunan was still standing there in perfect condition, but Jongboluan was covered in wounds. I lost. He put away his sword and said, "From now on, the name of the shadow belongs to your cult." Sevis and Eden looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. Sylvia still wanted to say something, but Jongboluan's figure had already disappeared. The sword saint who had lost the name of the shadow left, but Karina did not leave. Instead, she came to Ji-Yunan. "I'll bring enough spears next time." The Valkyrie was obviously not satisfied with losing to Ji-Yunan. "I'm afraid you won't dare to come." Ji-Yunan chuckled in response. "Where do you live?" "The flowering divine kingdom, the one that just became a main god." Ji-Yunan had caused quite a commotion after coming to the Pantheon world, but it was nothing compared to Lorenza. A new main god. The birth of a new main god was an earth-shattering event that could directly change the structure of the Pantheon world. Recently, Lorenza had not been able to rest. She had too many things to deal with and too many people to meet. She did not ascend through normal means, but in the Pantheon world, which made people even more curious. Thus, the existence of the Divine God Society became widely known in the Pantheon world. More and more gods tried to join it. "So, when can we go back?" Ji-Yunan asked in the flowering divine kingdom. In front of him were Shui-Ren, spiritual master spirit son, and Crazy Fist. They were the people who came from the Pantheon world. Only old man Zi Luo hadn't been seen since he arrived. Soon. Shui Ren smiled. In a year and a half at most, we'll be able to return to the Pantheon world in glory. Crazy Fist, on the other hand, said, why go back? It's so nice here, there are so many people to fight. Unlike Ji Nan, who had to go back to earn points, Crazy Fist had been living a comfortable life recently. Not many people in the Pantheon world knew of him, so he could easily find someone to challenge. Most of the time, his opponent would not even know who he was. Among the people who came from the Pantheon world, Ji Nan was the noisiest, and Crazy Fist was the second. Ji Nan shrugged, indicating that he did not care. Due to his lack of points, he could not accumulate too many sin points for the time being, but it was not a big problem. Time was still on his side before he stepped into the 9th stage, so there was no need for him to be in too much of a hurry. Besides, Shui Ren's words had undoubtedly hinted at something, and the result was not hard to guess. Ji Nan's life returned to peace. His usual activities were nothing more than drinking tea with Shui Ren and Spiritual Master Spirit Sun, or playing a few rounds of black cards with Sylvia. Sylvia still had not won, and there was no sign of her winning. As the days passed, the 9 people who had been sent out returned one after another. In the end, it was worse than Ji Nan had expected. 8 out of the 9 had returned, but only 3 had completed their job advancement, even though they had the full set of strategies provided by Ji Nan. Ji Nan was not disappointed, having been mentally prepared for this. He only told them to try again, or to change their route. Of course, before that, he had to recommend the Phantom Sword Sage route. This route, which required prerequisites, would naturally have stronger attributes and growth than the normal route. Who's missing? Ji Nan asked Lan Sai, who had already returned. And Tiansheng. He's going to be a bandit. Ji Nan could not help but smile when he recalled the young man who called himself a bandit. The bandit route suits him well, but the job advancement is difficult. He's probably in trouble since he's not back yet. Go and find out where he is, Ji Nan instructed, but he was not too concerned. He had left a mark on all 9 of them, so he would be the first to know if their lives were in danger. Chapter 381. The routes that players could take in their professions in the game were very interesting. In theory, a player could take countless routes. Rather than calling it a profession, it was more like learning from a master. The skills learned would, of course, belong to the player. Each route had its own upper and lower limits, as well as the attribute and level requirements for the profession. However, none of them would affect the player's own strength. These routes could also help players level up through various methods. Robber was one of the more interesting routes. Robber professions allowed players to improve themselves by robbing the most precious things of others. The missions and skills during the profession would also be related to the robber professions. According to Ji Nan's experience, the targets that he needed to rob for his profession were always people with considerable strength or background. Don't ask why Ji Nan had such experience. In order to complete his profession, Tiansheng had also robbed a powerful person. Macefield, the daughter of God. She's a real daughter of God. Both her parents are gods, Lan Sai said solemnly when she saw that Ji Nan didn't care. Macefield, I know. Ji Nan knew better than she did. She's the daughter of the god of steel and the goddess of sunlight, the one who roasts people into jerky. Macefield, the daughter of God, was also a well-known NPC in the game. Not only was she in the main plane, but she was also in the legendary realm. Her identity was so special that she had countless missions. Her parents weren't considered to be gods of a high level, but Macefield was their only daughter, so one could imagine how much they doted on her. The goddess of sunlight was a veteran level 7 god. She had been at this level for a long time, so her connections and power were not to be underestimated. The god of steel had just reached level 7, but he was growing rapidly. It was not impossible for him to reach level 8 or even level 9 in the future. It was also because of his potential that these two gods had the prerequisite to be together. Speaking of which, the god of steel had some interactions with Ji Nan. When Ji Nan went to the kingdom of the undead, he brought the Raymond clan to the heavenly world as a reserve force for the kingdom of God. Before Ji Nan, the Raymond clan was under the protection of the god of steel. Macefield should have reached the legendary realm long ago, right? It seems that the little guy has succeeded in his occupation, Ji Yunan said with a smile. And Tiansheng was only at the third order, not even at the peak of the third order. If he wanted to snatch the fourth order Macefield tradings, he must have successfully transitioned into a bandit. Yes. Lan Sai nodded and said, and the things he snatched, what? Snatch her underwear? Ji Yunan asked. He had seen this kind of mission before. The corner of Lan Sai's mouth twitched. How is that possible? He snatched a crystal ball. I heard that Macefield Tradings has offered a very high reward for finding Tiansheng's whereabouts. Macefield Tradings crystal ball, it's a good item. Ji Yunan could not help but sigh. The bandit path was very special. It required players to steal the most precious item from the other party. However, the most precious item might not necessarily be something good. Hence, in a situation like Macefield Tradings, where the value of the items was extremely high, it was extremely precious. What is that? Even Ji Yunan felt that it was something good, so Lan Sai could not help but be curious. It's no longer useful to me. It's a good item in your hands. Ji Yunan explained further, that crystal ball can store souls. If you die outside, you can use it to resurrect. Macefield Trading's crystal ball was an essential item for the lick path. It was the perfect material for a licker's phylactery. Even if one was not a lick, they could use this crystal ball to resurrect. However, they would need the help of others. It was one of the best items before the first-class advancement. Moreover, the difficulty of obtaining this item was not high. Macefield Tradings was a careless young mistress. It was too easy to get something from her. Lan Sai's eyes lit up. Then, we'll leave the crystal ball behind? Of course. Ji Yunan looked at her in confusion. Who would want something that's already in my hands? And Tiansheng was running quickly through the forest, carrying a wild wolf in his hand. Don't misunderstand, he was not running for his life. He was rushing back to start a fire and cook dinner. Tonight's dinner was roasted wolf meat. And Tiansheng, who had been living in a bandit's nest since he was young, was no stranger to surviving in the wild. Being chased by Macefield Tradings was like a joke to him. And Tiansheng would only change places every 2 days. During this period, he was even in the mood to improve his meals. Just as Tiansheng was sitting on the barren land, roasting the wolf meat unhurriedly, a voice rang out. Seems like you're living a comfortable life. Lan Sai had appeared beside him and said in a cold tone. And Tiansheng was not surprised at all, as if he had expected Lan Sai to appear. He took a big bite of the wolf meat and said, "When are you going to bring me back?" Lan Sai did not answer him. Instead, her gaze became colder. "Do you think you can defeat me now?" "That's right." And Tiansheng threw down a wolf leg and punched at Lan Sai. Then, he flew back at an even faster speed. Lan Sai was, after all, a person with a godhead. After so many years of accumulation, her strength had already reached the peak of the 4th level. She was just waiting for the day when she would have an epiphany and take the last step to truly ignite the godfire. Even though Tiansheng had chosen the path of a bandit, it was still impossible for him to surpass Lan Sai. A moment later, Tiansheng was standing beside Lan Sai with a fawning expression. "Lady Lan Sai, I was wrong." Lan Sai looked at him coldly. "Come with me." In the Sunlight Kingdom, a blonde girl was grabbing the arm of a noblewoman. She said bitterly, "Mother, someone stole my crystal ball. I didn't cause trouble this time, I swear." These two people were Miss Macefield and her mother, the Sunlight Goddess Sandra. The Sunlight Goddess obviously did not believe her daughter's words. She put down the brush in her hand and looked at the drawing board in front of her. "You really didn't provoke him first?" "Absolutely not." Macefield raised her finger and swore. "Uncle Adam can testify for me. It was clearly that person who stole my crystal ball." Sandra frowned slightly. Looking at her daughter's confident expression, it did not seem like she was lying. So, was there really a mortal who dared to bully her daughter? Thinking of this, Sandra did not ask her daughter any more questions. Instead, she said to the guards outside, "Ask Adam to see me." Chapter 382. Did a robber really steal her crystal ball? Sandra asked, still in disbelief. Sandra knew that her daughter's crystal ball was a gift from her husband from the kingdom of the dead. Sandra had known this for a long time. However, someone dared to steal her daughter's crystal ball. Did that person not know who it was? That's what we thought before yesterday, Adam said solemnly. Standing in front of the sunlight goddess, Adam said in a serious tone, but today, we received news that someone took the bandit to the flowering god nation. The flowering divine kingdom? Sandra's expression froze, and her brush stopped moving. Even if the divine kingdom of the new overgod Lorenza wasn't as powerful as some of the older overgods, it wasn't something a tier 7 god like her could afford to offend. After a moment of silence, the sunlight goddess finally said, "Let's investigate the bandit's background first." "Take out the crystal ball," Jiyu Nan said to Tianxing, who was standing in front of him. "I stole it with my own abilities. Why should I give it to you?" And Tianxing, who had been obedient just a moment ago, immediately retorted. "You can steal from others, but I can steal from you. Are you going to give it to me, or do you want me to steal it from you?" Jiyu Nan said with a half-smile. And Tianxing rolled his eyes, but he still took out the crystal ball from his pocket. "Boss, I can give it to you, but you can't just take it all, right?" he said. "When we used to split the loot, Boss always got the biggest share, but our brothers got a share too. Otherwise, who would work so hard to steal from others?" And Tianxing tried to persuade Jiyu Nan not to take all the loot for himself. He even brought up his days as a bandit. "You have a point." Jiyu Nan fell into deep thought. "Then as a reward, you can be resurrected." "Resurrected?" And Tianxing looked confused. He didn't know what Jiyu Nan was talking about. "That's right. If you are killed outside, I can resurrect you as long as you leave a wisp of your soul with me." And Tianxing was overjoyed. "There's no price." Jiyu Nan laughed involuntarily and said, "Of course there is. If you're resurrected, your strength won't recover. You'll have to start from the beginning again. That's not bad." And Tianxing pondered for a while before saying, "Deal. Then, leave your divine soul in here." Jiyu Nan handed the crystal ball to Tianxing. Realizing that he had been tricked, Tianxing left with an indignant look on his face. Liang Ruxin then appeared. Liang Ruxin belonged to the group of 9 that failed. He suffered a crushing defeat in the root challenge and didn't even pass the first round. Jiyu Nan had already expected this, because Liang Ruxin's path wasn't good, he chose the scholar path. More than half of the scholar's test had nothing to do with strength. Instead, it tested one's knowledge. In this aspect, Liang Ruxin couldn't compare to players with Baidu. Therefore, when the first question appeared, which required him to examine the convergence of a certain limit, Liang Ruxin decisively chose to give up. How does it feel to challenge a completely unknown domain? Jiyu Nan asked with a smile as he sipped on a light green fruit juice. Liang Ruxin smiled bitterly. "I'm willing to listen to your instructions and choose the route, sir." "Smart man." Jiyu Nan patted his shoulder. "Try the Phantom Sword Sage first. With your foundation, you have a chance of succeeding." "Yes." The Phantom Sword Sage was a super route that could be used all the way to the 10th level. Furthermore, there were almost no barriers to entry. It was an extremely high-quality route. A true Phantom Sword Sage could only become a true Phantom Sword Sage when one was close to the 5th level. However, anyone with outstanding talent could become Buoluan's disciple and slowly cultivate. After explaining the key points of becoming Buoluan's disciple to Liang Ruxin, Jiyu Nan told him to go back and prepare. At this moment, a figure slowly appeared. "Good afternoon, Your Excellency Jiyu Nan. My name is Mackenzie." It was a tall man in a black suit. At this moment, he bowed slightly and had a respectful expression on his face. "Someone from Lorenza?" Jiyu Nan raised an eyebrow. Lorenza had been so busy recently that he didn't expect that she would have time to send someone to his place. "My master has gone to the Red River God Nation." Mackenzie seemed to have read Jiyu Nan's mind. He smiled and said, "I'm here for the Sunlight Goddess and the Divine Lady." In another place in the Flowery God Nation, a few men and women in neat uniforms were discussing something. "I heard that a crystal ball was stolen from Ms. Maysfield. Her Highness, the Sunlight Goddess, sent someone to negotiate." "Who did it?" One of the guests that the Great Her Highness brought from the heavenly realms. The heavenly realms? They are as barbaric as the northerners. The heavenly realms regarded the gods as barbarians, and vice versa. These people were Lorenza's messengers. They were responsible for managing the god nation and had high authority. In my opinion, Her Highness has already become the supreme being. Why should she care about Sandra? A blue-haired woman said. Obviously, she wasn't interested in the sunlight goddess. As a messenger, she shouldn't call a god by name. Be careful with your words. The young man beside her frowned and said, Deara, remember who we are. Mackenzie went to negotiate with the guest. Let's see what he thinks. Barbarians like that. Do you expect them to hand over the crystal they stole? The blue-haired woman, Deara, said with a pout. She didn't favor either side. She looked down on both sides. Another person beside her said, Her Highness has just been promoted. We must be fair. We can't leave a bad reputation. That's right. While they were still talking, Mackenzie finally walked in slowly from outside with a worried look on her face. How did it go? Was the guest rude? The young man from before asked when he saw Mackenzie's expression. No. Mr. Ji-Yunan was very polite. Mackenzie smiled bitterly. He didn't get any negative response from Ji-Yunan. That's good. He doesn't look like an unreasonable person, another messenger said. This person had interacted with Ji-Yunan and the others before, and he had even witnessed the scene of Ji-Yunan and Sylvia playing cards with his own eyes. You're wrong, Mackenzie said helplessly. Mackenzie had a helpless look on his face as he said, Do you remember that not long ago, 2 goddesses fought in the Dragon Realm, and that heavy silver island was destroyed? Of course. I heard that Her Highness Karina was injured, and even her weapon was broken. People are saying that Her Highness Sylvia must have gotten help from someone. Mackenzie nodded and took out 2 broken spears from his back. The guest asked me to give these to the sunlight goddess and said, the messengers immediately came up and grabbed the spears from Mackenzie's hands. Is this, judging from the quality and level, it does look like it, stop arguing. What else did the guest say? Chapter 383. The goddess of sunlight pays her utmost respect to you, Your Excellency. When Mackenzie came to Ji-Yunan again, he was even more respectful than before, and he had the attitude of the goddess of sunlight. Just as Ji-Yunan had expected, the goddess of sunlight did not waste her tens of thousands of years of life. After seeing Karina's spear, she decisively chose to give in. Outsiders had no way to know about the fight for the title of Shadow. Both parties had chosen to meet in a small, uninhabited plain for the sake of reputation. However, the conflict between Karina and Sylvia, and the fact that Karina had asked someone to reforge her spear, were known to outsiders. Therefore, people naturally connected the two. Ji-Yunan took back the 2 parts of the spear from Mackenzie and asked casually, You said that Lorenza went to the Red River Kingdom. Is she back yet? The Red River goddess was not a main god, but she was Lorenza's good friend. They had always been on the same side in the world of gods. Now that Lorenza had ascended, she would not forget her old friend, which was related to her reputation and reputation. My lord has not returned yet. Send someone to inform her that she should be back soon, Ji-Yunan said in a very calm tone. Mackenzie looked at Ji-Yunan with a strange look for a while, but he did not say anything. He bowed and left. Whether he believed it or not, at least he dared not ignore Ji-Yunan's order for now. Ji-Yunan did not pay attention to him. After all, some things could not be sensed if one's level was too low. That's right. Just like when Lorenza was ascending, the abnormality of the birth of a convergent had begun to appear. The closer one was to the main god level, the easier it would be to notice. Also, for people like Ji-Yunan who had been prepared for it, it would be easier for him to notice it. Still, it was not Shui-Ren. If Ji-Yunan's guess was right, it was old man Zi-Luo who was going to ascend this time. This old man might have woken up a long time ago, but he had been accumulating power, or even suppressing it on purpose. The reason was simple. It was much more difficult for him to ascend in the world of gods. In the past, he had blocked Song Fei's path, so Song Fei had joined forces with 9 Soulstar Master to move him away. Now that Song Fei had risen to the top, He had turned around and stood in front of old man Ziluo. Even if he wasn't blocking the way, would Song Fei just sit back and watch Elder Ziluo ascend? Perhaps he really was a gentleman, but only a fool would bet his future on Song Fei's character. Old man Ziluo was obviously a scheming and astute person. He had even waited until someone like Lorenza, who had ascended to the next rank, had appeared in the Divine God Assembly before he decided to reveal himself. Therefore, the real reason why old man Ziluo had spoken up all those years ago was not because of Ji Yunan, but because Lorenza had already arrived in the heavenly planes. If someone discovered Lorenza's existence, this old man would be the real last line of defense. However, Ji Yunan and Shui Ren's performance saved him some trouble. Indeed, it won't be long before we can return. Ji Yunan muttered to himself. He was still waiting to return to the other side and harvest the astral realms he had chosen so that he could earn enough points. On the other hand, he could only choose to wait here in the Pantheon realm. He could not go on a killing spree. If he obtained too many sin points and reached the standard of a rank 9, there would be a certain risk of his identity being exposed. Once his identity as a heretic god was exposed, at least in the Pantheon realm, he would truly become the enemy of the entire world. After that day, Lorenza returned to the god nation very quickly. Perhaps Ji Yunan was not the only one who had warned her. Only when she personally oversaw the situation could it be considered reassuring. This was different from her previous ascension. This time, everyone knew where old man Ziluo was, and the possibility of someone secretly plotting against her could not be ruled out. After all, Song Fei and 9 Soul Star might not be able to come by themselves, but it was entirely possible for them to pay a certain price in exchange for the help of the overgods. Not long after that day, Taoist Master Spirit's son came looking for him. What a rare guest! Ji Yunan could not help but sigh as he looked at the old Taoist silhouette. Ever since Lorenza's return to the Pantheon realm and the Divine God Society's reputation had spread, Taoist Master Spirit's son had not shown his face for a long time. Shui Ren, on the other hand, would often come looking for Ji Yunan for tea. I have something I need your help with, Taoist Master Spirit's son said with a chuckle. He was already quite familiar with Ji Yunan, so he did not stand on ceremony and directly told him the reason for his visit. What is it? Are there any benefits? Ji Yunan asked. If I ask for your help, there will naturally be benefits. Taoist Master Spirit's son put on a look that said I know you very well before slowly revealing the reason for his visit. It was a rather simple matter, and that was to ask Ji Yunan to be the examiner. The Divine God Society's reputation had spread, and more gods were interested in joining them. This allowed the organization's strength in the Pantheon realm to finally usher in the best opportunity to develop. It should be known that the development of the Divine God Society on both sides was extremely uneven. The Celestial realm was much stronger, and aside from the others, there were 8 core members, the Celestial Lords, while there were only 3 gods. We want to recruit a new batch of members, so the assessment criteria this time will be much stricter than before, Taoist Master Spirit's son said. This was to be expected. After all, the organization's reputation had spread, and there was no lack of people who wanted to fish in troubled waters, or even act as informants. I know that you have a good understanding of many people here, so I'd like to invite you to check on them, Taoist Master Spirit's son said bluntly. Ji Yunan had no intention of hiding the fact that he was most likely from the Pantheon realm, so Taoist Master Spirit's son did not hold back on this point. Ji Yunan said thoughtfully, why didn't you look for the organization's core members here? Of course I did. Taoist Master Spirit's son looked helpless. Isn't it because we don't have enough manpower? There are too many people to check. Then your inspection is really strict. Ji Yunan looked at him strangely. The absolute number of gods was not many to begin with. If it was to the point where they could not check on all of them, it could only mean that the inspection was very detailed, so much so that a single target would take up a lot of time. Taoist Master Spirit's son nodded. Since the organization has stepped onto the stage, we can't be as loose as before. After all, we are an organization with fusing DAOs. We might even have too soon. At this point, the two of them could not help but smile at each other. So, what's in it for me? Ji Yunan did not care too much about how Taoist Master Spirit Sun wanted to inspect them, and first asked about his reward. Chapter 384. There were all sorts of factions within the party. Ji Yunan was well aware of the existence of internal strife within any organization. However, this was the first time he had seen someone like Daoist Spirit Sun, who was willing to openly talk about factions. However, the old Daoist priest quickly gave an explanation. The Celestial Society's members were all astral lords or deities. They didn't have high requirements for resources and rarely had direct conflicts of interest. Under such circumstances, it was better to have a clear division of factions instead of a chaotic mess. It would be more convenient for management and cooperation. After all, factions didn't necessarily have to fight, they could also work together. According to Daoist Spirit Sun's vision, the future Celestial Society would exist in the form of a coalition of several major factions. Shui Ren and Zi Luo approved of this idea. Sounds good. Ji Yunan wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of organization. In fact, a well-known assassin organization had a similar structure. Seeing that Ji Yunan had no objections, Daoist Spirit Sun handed a list of names to Ji Yunan. These were all the deities who had applied to join the Celestial Society. We need to examine the applicant's strength and purpose, mainly the latter, Daoist Spirit Sun said. The deities' strength wasn't much of a secret. Rather, it was their purpose in joining the Celestial Society that was worth investigating. How do we examine them? Ji Yunan asked as he looked at the names on the list. There are no restrictions. You can choose. Daoist Spirit Sun gave Ji Yunan the most autonomy. Even if you don't take the examination, you can directly recruit people. But if there's a problem, I, the faction master, will have to take responsibility. Ji Yunan asked, raising his eyebrows. That's right. However, faction master is too unpleasant to hear. We need to give you a more impressive title in the future, Daoist Spirit Sun said with a smile. After interacting with him for a long time, one would discover that this old Daoist priest was actually quite humorous. He wasn't as old-fashioned as he seemed. Letting the core members become the people in charge of their respective factions and developing the members in the lower levels was a highly efficient choice. In order to ensure that no one would randomly add people, the system was also very reasonable. It was no wonder that the other core members' examination progress was so slow. Perhaps they didn't intend to add too many people in the first place. As the gods of this world, they had their own network of connections, so they could just choose from them. Is Sylvia a core member? The first person that came to Ji Yunan's mind was naturally his poker partner. She's very experienced, but she's never been involved in the organization's affairs, so she's not considered a core member. Daoist Spirit Sun paused for a moment before continuing. The older batch of members must also belong to their respective factions. You can accept Sylvia as long as she's willing. Ji Yunan nodded non-committally before circling two names on the list. Let's go with them. I think I know why these two fellows came here. You want to recruit Karina. I don't agree. In Ji Yunan's room, Sylvia, who had just agreed to join Ji Yunan's faction, was immediately shocked by the news that followed. That's right. One of the two names that Ji Yunan circled was Karina, the goddess of martial arts. Okay. Ji Yunan nodded at Sylvia's protest. It's your turn. You only know how to play cards. The goddess of shadow threw the cards in her hand angrily. Do you know why Karina wants to join the organization? Not because of you, but because of me. Ji Yunan said carelessly. By the way, Karina is also good at cards. Do you want to have a try? Sylvia left angrily, probably to complain to someone. Ji Yunan, on the other hand, did not care about it at all. Karina was a free fighter, and Lucien did not want to waste it. Besides, what he was really interested in this time was the other god that he had chosen. David, the god of Lost. His divine power was very special. He could create a path that no one could get out of, and he could also trace it back to the source. His second ability was exactly what Ji Yunan needed right now. Ji Yunan's paradise was in the heavenly world, so he could not earn too many points here. However, there were still many good things in the place that he was familiar with. For example, after getting Karina's broken spear, He could use it to open a treasure, which would be of great help to the paradise. However, Ji Nan had never done this task before. He was still thinking about how to find the treasure, and now David had delivered himself to him. In the flowering paradise, Shui Ren and Master Spirit Sun were sitting opposite each other. Ji Nan is testing the newcomers, and Crazy Fist is going to challenge a god. Are you still going to stop me? Master Spirit Sun looked at Shui Ren and said calmly. It seems that you have everything ready. Shui Ren nodded and then sighed. It's been so many years. You still can't let it go. Master Spirit Sun smiled. I joined the Divine God Society for so many years, just for today. You don't want to wait for the old man to finish his breakthrough? We can all help you. There was no smile on Shui Ren's face, only seriousness. Senior Zi Luo has already saved my life, and the Divine God Society has nothing to do with this. Why should I drag you into this? Master Spirit Sun was still calm. You have no confidence at all. Shui Ren stared into his old friend's eyes. When Ji Nan saw the lost god, Ji Nan almost jumped out of his skin when he saw his miserable appearance. Speaking of which, Ji Nan had met the lost god before in the game. Back then, David had not been so miserable. The lost god was wearing ragged clothes, and his face was full of dust. He looked like a beggar who had been wandering for a long time. You're David, right? Your Excellency Ji Nan. David smiled bitterly. I'm afraid I can only look like this for a while. I accidentally offended the one in Mist Town. Upon hearing this, Ji Nan immediately understood. He smiled and said, Offended Divana? You're brave. Divana was one of the 3 sisters of misfortune. Offending her was equivalent to being cursed by the gods of poverty, misfortune, and misfortune. David, the lost god, was famous for his sarcastic face. Wherever he went, he would offend people. Therefore, when Ji Nan saw his name, he knew that he was here to seek refuge. Do you want to join the Divine Gods Association? Ji Nan didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. Yes, Your Excellency. David tidied up his clothes, trying to make himself look less messy. I've heard about your organization, and, all right, stop bragging. Ji Nan interrupted him. He did not believe that this guy, who was always on the run, would know much about the Divine God Society. As he spoke, he took out Karina's spear. These spears are stained with the blood of the first god of craftsmen. Help me find the source of the blood, and the Divine God Society will protect you. David's face stiffened. The first god of craftsmen was from the first divine war. It'll take a lot of energy to find him. Chapter 385. David was told to take a rest. Since they were already in the flowery Holy Kingdom, Ji Nan was not worried that David might run away. Even if they were going to go back to the source, there was no hurry. At least, Ji Nan did not want to go with a beggar. The Misfortune sisters were very famous, and they were not weak. However, they also knew that they were not very popular, so they would not make enemies easily. Even someone like David, who was good at courting death, would only be punished slightly. The curse would not last too long. Ji Nan was not in a hurry right now. It took Lorenza 2 years to prepare for her breakthrough. Even if the old man Zi Luo had a better foundation, it would still take him a long time. 4 people at their level, it was normal for it to take a year and a half. Ji Nan. Karina came to Ji Nan. Obviously, she had found out who Ji Nan was. It was no secret among the gods that Lorenza had returned from the heavenly realm with a few guests from the heavenly realm. Let's fight. Karina pointed at Ji Nan with a brand new golden spear in her hand. The spear looked no different from the original one, but both Ji Nan and Karina knew the difference. The spear had been with Karina for tens of thousands of years, and it had drunk the blood of hundreds of gods, which was rare among all the divine items. Why do you want to fight with me? Ji Nan didn't attack but asked instead. If it were someone else, Karina would have already stabbed him with the spear. However, Ji Nan was someone who had defeated her before, which earned him the right to speak to her. Karina tilted her head and thought for a while. She did not have any grudge against this man. When they first met, he was standing beside Sylvia. You beat me. Karina's mind was not complicated. She finally remembered that Ji Nan had already attacked her without any hesitation when they first met. Ji Nan nodded, but he did not feel sorry at all. I can help you get Austin. Karina's spear suddenly stopped in front of Ji Nan, and she quickly put it back on her back. Mr. Ji Nan. Karina pretended to be a lady, but it was not convincing at all. If you act like this every time you see Austin, it's reasonable that he won't like you. Ji Nan curled his lips. Karina immediately stopped smiling and glared at Ji Nan. If Ji Nan could not give her an explanation, she would use her full strength to stab the spear. Theoretically, Austin will never like you. At least, I have never seen such an ending. Ji Nan recalled the strategy in his mind and said seriously, however, there is one way that you will end up together. What should I do? Karina blurted out. She didn't care about what Ji Nan said. She didn't understand a lot of people's words anyway. Become the main god before the next war of gods. Ji Nan stared into her eyes. Help the gods of light win the war and reach the top of all gods. By then, you can marry whoever you want. Karina was a bit stunned. She was not that stupid, but she did not think that she could become the main god at will. There were only 12 main gods in the world of gods. Including Lorenza, who had just become the main god, and those who had died in the early years, there were less than 20. There were billions of creatures in the world, but only one of them could make it. It was not hard to imagine how difficult it was. What if? I can't do it. Karina murmured. If you can't do it, wait for the next time. Ji Nan took it for granted. Austin has no more room for improvement. You will catch up with him sooner or later, as long as you work hard. Come on, young man. You can do it with love. Karina was indeed a good example of using love to generate power. She started from rank 8 and became the leader of the gods of light. The official explanation was that it was because of love. Although the goddess of combat did have some background, charging so fiercely was beyond the scope of a cheat. Ji Nan did not lie to Karina. There were so many endings in the game, and this was the only way for her to be with Austin. It was only when she became a core deity and personally participated in the next god war that the two great god systems engaged in a chaotic war. Only then would the god of light and justice be defeated. As long as it's Austin, it should be fine even if he's just a mortal, right? Ji Nan could not help but smile when he thought of the ending. Pushing for the next war of gods was also Ji Nan's interest. His holy kingdom was located in the heavenly world, which meant that he could not invade the holy kingdom and kill those important people during the first stage of his first class. In this way, he would have to face more enemies after he became a second class. Only by starting a war of gods could he reduce the pressure in the future. A few days later, when the god of Lost finally got rid of the curse and became a noble young master again, Karina came to Ji Nan again. What are you doing here? Ji Nan was about to take David to find the origin of the spear. After a few days of searching, David had basically confirmed his destination. It was in the main plane of Atrenza, which the gods of darkness had just taken over. Fight. Karina pointed the spear at Ji Nan again. If you want to advance, you need to find someone to fight. Ji Nan was startled for a while and finally nodded. Come with me. I'll take you to fight. Atrenza, I'm back. A calm and somewhat indifferent voice rang out. It was Shui Ren and Daoist Spirit Yang. This voice came from Daoist Spirit Yang. The two stepped on a grassland. Not far away from them was a graveyard. Pedestrians were passing by in 2s and 3s, most of them holding a bunch of chrysanthemums in their hands. The atmosphere was a bit sad, but the weather was not good. There was no rain. Instead, the sky was clear. Master Spirit Sun slowly walked into the graveyard and walked to a tombstone. The name of the tombstone was Ms. Margaret. Judging from her life, she should be a person who had lived for thousands of years. It was very rare for a tombstone to be preserved for thousands of years. It not only showed that the tombstone was made of amazing material, but also that it was often cleaned. Sorry to disturb you. A middle-aged man came to their side and looked at Daoist Spirit Yang in surprise. Sirs, are you Madam Margaret? Master Spirit Sun slightly frowned. And you are? I'm Houghton, Houghton Cubble. Houghton emphasized his family name. Our family has been guarding this lady's tombstone for thousands of years. Chapter 386. After visiting Margaret's tombstone, Taoist spirit Sun threw himself into the preparation work. The ancient continent of Atrenza had just ended its war in recent years. The Holy Church was completely destroyed, and the Dark Empire ruled the continent. From then on, this place was under the control of the Dark Pantheon. This was the general trend in the world of gods. Among the 12 overgods, the Dark Pantheon occupied 7 of them, and their power was enough to crush the Light Pantheon. If not for Austin, who turned the tide and supported the Light Pantheon with his extraordinary power, the world of gods would have been dark long ago. What Taoist spirit Sun was doing now was subverting the rule of the Dark Empire. To be more precise, he was subverting the rule of the Empire's royal family. Orders were issued one after another, and teams of people were sent out. A plan that had been planned for many years, and was only waiting for Atrenza to be unified. Now, the tip of the iceberg was revealed. Ji-Yunan and Karina are here in Atrenza, Shui-Ren suddenly said when Taoist spirit Sun was writing at a fast speed. He was responsible for receiving information from the Divine God Society, so he was the first to know. Taoist spirit Sun paused for a moment, then continued, Ji-Yunan has taken the lost god. He's probably looking for some ancient ruins. It has nothing to do with us. Atrenza was huge, and Ji-Yunan's treasure hunt did not conflict with Taoist spirit Sun's plan. Are you really not going to ask them for help? Shui-Ren said with a smile. This time, Taoist spirit Sun did not stop writing. I don't cheat my own people. So, I'm not one of you? Shui-Ren said angrily, glaring at Taoist spirit Sunday. You jumped into the pit yourself. Atrenza was indeed huge. There were not many primary planes in the world of gods, and it was one of them. A primary plane that completely belonged to the Dark Pantheon was even rarer. It meant that this plane could be coordinated and developed, and the power of faith could be harvested with the highest efficiency. Ji-Yunan brought Karina and David to a strange place. It used to be a small mountain range, but it was shrouded by a strange power and turned into a garden. The first god of craftsmanship forged the divine spear here. He used his own blood to water this divine weapon. The blood mist evaporated and affected the surrounding laws. David's pupils slowly returned to normal, but he was still talking. Several legendary humans have occupied this place. Karina looked up. The mist outside the garden did not seem to affect her at all. Ji-Yunan was no stranger to this place. This is Spectre's garden. I didn't expect the divine spear to be forged here. Due to Atrenza's year-round expeditions, the number of missions they took on was uncountable, so Ji-Yunan was quite familiar with this continent. Ji-Yunan took out the 2 broken spears, and sure enough, they were emitting a faint light. This was something left behind by the craftsman god, and it resonated with the divine spear. Is this my spear? Karina moved closer to Lucian. It's mine now, Ji-Yunan emphasized. Karina rolled her eyes and waved the new spear in her hand. It's just the masterpiece of the first god of craftsmanship. Lucian was sure that if the spear had not been watered with the blood of countless deities, the first god of craftsmanship would not be as good as the current one in terms of craftsmanship and materials. As time went by, the deities were also improving. It was always nonsense to say that the older the weapon was, the more powerful it was. However, what Ji-Yunan cared about was not the weapon itself, but what it represented. The first god of craftsmanship was the longest-serving god of craftsmanship. In other words, he had accumulated an unimaginable amount of wealth. After all, it cost a lot of money to ask him to forge a divine weapon. According to the background of the game, the real treasures were all left in the place where the spear was forged. Why did the first god of craftsmanship do this? Karina was confused after listening to Ji-Yunan's story. She was born much later than the first god of craftsmanship, and she was not the first owner of the spear, so she did not know much about it. He named this spear Liath. It was the greatest achievement of his life, although it does not seem to be a big deal now, Ji-Yunan explained calmly. This was the power of technological innovation, and the power of knowledge. At least, the first god of craftsmanship did not understand the mechanics of materials. The spear he was most proud of was hard enough, but its resistance to shear was very weak, which was why Ji Nan broke it easily. "Let's go in." Ji Nan didn't say anything else and said directly. Spectre's Garden was just a stronghold of several legendary figures, and the three deities did not take it seriously at all. They did not even try to hide their tracks and stepped into the garden directly. The moment the three stepped into the garden, a shadow floated in front of them. The shadow looked down, but the words spoken were not necessarily respectful. "Your Highnesses, Spectre's Garden is under the protection of Lord Claude, the Archmage. We are the followers of the Dark Kingdom." The Dark Kingdom was the god of darkness, Lewis's holy kingdom, and Archmage Claude was Lewis's spokesperson on this continent. The laws of the god of darkness and the goddess of darkness were very similar. Although this made Lewis almost lose the hope of becoming a main god, it also gave him strength that far surpassed those below the main god level. For example, the origin laws of light and darkness, as long as one was not too stupid to obtain them, would not be too bad. "So it is Lord Lewis's territory." David nodded. He did not show it on his face, but he had the intention to retreat in his heart. The main plane was a very special existence. Experts above the main god level could not personally descend. At most, they could only attack from afar. Therefore, great gods like Lewis were the main force in conquering the main plane. In fact, on the Atrenza continent, the royal family of the Darkness Empire was Lewis's bloodline. Therefore, it was not strange at all that Ji Nan and the others encountered Lewis's forces, because his faction was the most powerful people on this continent. David only came here to search for treasures because he was threatened by Ji Nan. He did not want to provoke Lewis because of this. Of course, this was also because the person in front of him was respectful enough. Otherwise, the dignity of a god was not something that a mere legend could offend. David was ready to retreat. Even if this was Lewis's territory, the three of them could just sneak in. However, he did not expect that before Ji Nan said anything, he had already landed on the person in front of him. What Ji Nan used was Karina's broken spear, which directly shattered the shadow that had just solidified. Even the whole Spectre's Garden began to shake. "It's going to collapse." Ji Nan raised his head unhurriedly. He knew that the person who died in his hands was most likely the manager of the garden. "Mr. Ji Nan." David felt a bit thirsty. "If we kill people directly, it's okay. It's still too early for Lewis to know the news." While speaking, Ji Nan waved the broken spear in his hand. "Besides, didn't I find a scapegoat?" Chapter 387. Atrenza was a rather lively main plane. A few decades ago, when the players first entered the game, this was the main quest location for the players. Dragon's Audiobook network. From this, Ji Nan also knew that the timeline in the Pantheon world was very likely the same as in the game. On the day he transmigrated to the Heavenly Realm, the Pantheon world was also the time when the players first entered the game. However, because Ji Nan had stayed in the Heavenly Realm for a few decades, when he arrived here, the main plot of Atrenza had already ended. Just like the players, the Dark Pantheon obtained a complete victory. The absolute protagonist of the game, the Black Warrior Goro, rose to power. Before the age of 50, he went from a normal person to a god and successfully ignited the divine fire. Since Lewis was the leader of this continent, since he obtained a complete victory, he naturally benefited the most. Lewis, who was already a level 10 god, once again rose in status in the Dark Pantheon. The position of the number one person below the Lord God was originally occupied by Lorenza. Now that she had successfully ascended, Lewis had the tendency to take over this position. However, even with Lewis's status, Ji Nan had no intention of giving him face. Piercing the guardian of Spectre's Garden with a single spear, the protective precept of this secret realm collapsed instantly, revealing the true nature of the garden. After losing the concealment of the precept, Spectre's Garden quickly lost its mysterious aura and became just like any other ordinary garden. More and more people began to flee in all directions. In the face of an enemy that they could not defeat, most people still did not have the courage to fight. Ji Nan took the lead, stepping on the precious plants in Spectre's Garden without mercy. It was not that no one tried to resist. After the guardian of the garden died instantly, Ji Yunan could clearly see that there were two legends who had different opinions. One of them quickly fled, probably to report the situation, while the other activated the defensive magic circle in the garden in an attempt to buy time. Of course, there was nothing much to say about the result. Even David could not be trapped by a law of this level. Clearly, the opponent did not realize what level of opponent he was facing. Your Excellency Ji Yunan. David followed behind Ji Yunan, his face a little bitter. Since you have the divine spear, it shouldn't be difficult to find the craftsman god's treasure. Why don't I go first? This is your inspection process, Mr. David, Ji Yunan said slowly with a strange smile. David's expression froze. Only then did he remember that he was here for an inspection, even though he had already accepted it as a deal. Since Ji Yunan didn't want to let him go, he could only continue to follow. After all, he was a person who had been hunted for so many years. The god of Lost gritted his teeth and finally adjusted his state of mind, not saying anything more. Even though he had offended so many people, there was no one at the level of the god of darkness, Lewis. Hey, didn't you say you're bringing me here to fight? Karina was even less afraid of Lewis, so she asked directly. This goddess of combat was not afraid of anyone below the main god level. She had fought with level 10 gods before, but the result was the same. No one could hurt her super strong divine body. Although the law of combat was called combat, it was also called the law of taking a beating or the law of iron sheet among the players. Not only Karina, but also the players who focused on defense could also choose the law of combat, and the final result would be the same. Super defense and the evil god's super recovery ability, but it lacked damage output. Someone will let you fight later, Ji Yunan said calmly. The first craftsman god was not only good at smithing, he was also good at fighting. In the palace of the Dark Empire, busy people could be seen everywhere, and government officials were handling official business in various palaces. When the world was just settled, there were many things to deal with and distribute, and unexpected situations were happening everywhere. However, today's situation was much more special. Lord Claude, there's a mutiny in the border territory. Lord Claude, there's a letter from Grand Duke Van Storff. Lord Claude, Great Wizard Claude was the Prime Minister of the Dark Empire. Almost all the internal affairs had to be handled by him. At the same time, he was also the brain of the Dark Emperor. But today, this brain of the Dark Emperor seemed to be under a lot of pressure. He felt that the situation in various places seemed to have broken out on the same day, and the number of things he had to deal with was too much for him to handle. Claude even thought that someone was setting up a conspiracy, and the first thing to do was to bring down the entire internal affairs department of the empire with a lot of heavy administrative work. But soon, he ruled out this idea. After all, the situation was too widespread, and the types were too complicated. It did not seem to be man-made at all. If it was really man-made, how much time and energy did the other party have to spend to set up such a conspiracy? As the brain of the Dark Empire who had just settled down the world, Claude could not think of any force that could do this. Lord Claude, there's a situation in Ghost's Garden, another official said as he hurried over to the Great Wizard's table. He did not even have time to pass the information to the Great Wizard. Obviously, he felt that the information was too urgent and had to be cut in line to deal with it. Claude, who was writing quickly on the table, suddenly looked up and stared at the person who came. Who did it? The Great Wizard stopped writing, and his voice was deep and cold. After all, this world belonged to the top experts. When faced with the legendary level experts, the ordinary armies could not fight back. The Ghost Garden was guarded by 3 legendary experts, but it was easily breached. Even the message had to be delivered by an official. This meant that the enemy's power was beyond imagination. Could it be that the remnants of one of the factions still had their top forces left? Claude frowned. This situation was much more troublesome than the previous small things. It's not a force on the continent. The official seemed to know what Claude was thinking, and he said, it's the last message from the gods. It's the goddess of combat, Karina. When saying this, the official's face was filled with bitterness, but also a little relaxed. After all, it was not something that he could handle. Claude, on the other hand, was not relaxed. He was already burdened with heavy administrative work, and suddenly a famous goddess came out of nowhere. This was going to kill him. Inform His Majesty of this news. I'll go to the ghost garden myself. The great wizard pondered for a moment and quickly made a decision. Div class equals other underscore links text download address mobile reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this time. Chapter 427 Chapter 4. Chapter 388. The Spectre's Garden covered a large area. Dragon Audiobook Network. According to Ji Yunan's understanding, this place was set up by the government of the Dark Empire to plant rare plants, but the government did not admit this. There were also quests related to this in the game, but for Ji Yunan, it was no longer attractive. Ji Yunan was not too familiar with the interior of the garden, but with the guidance of the spear, it was impossible for them to get lost. Is this the treasure? As Ji Yunan stood still, Karina looked around in confusion. There was nothing around. It was an empty space. There was nothing special about the underground. For a god, it was a piece of cake to determine whether the underground was solid or hollow. Yes, it's here, Dave said. Although this god of the lost path was a little timid, and his ability to attract hatred was a little strong, he still had a strong control over his divine domain. However, he was also puzzled as to where the first craftsman god had hidden the so-called treasure. The god of lost was responsible for leading the way, but not for digging. Ji Yunan knew the process very well. Although he did not dig this treasure himself in the game, some players must have tried. One of the biggest advantages for players was that they could communicate with each other. Ji Yunan had also read about the process on the forums and guides. He took out the two broken parts of the spear and stabbed it into the ground. The reason why Ji Yunan used the word ruthless was because Ji Yunan's movements and expression were indeed very ruthless, as if he was stabbing into the enemy's body. What surprised the two was that after Ji Yunan finished his action, the cracks on the ground looked very strange. It was not a normal crack. Instead, it felt like a needle had pierced into someone's skin. After the spear was stabbed into the ground, some black sticky liquid began to ooze out. This is... Dave looked at the ground in shock. He sensed a very familiar feeling from the black liquid. This sense of familiarity was not something he had seen before, but something he had just seen. The ground of Spectre's Garden is especially hard and fertile, so it's very suitable for plants to grow. Ji Yunan smiled and explained, very few people know that this is because this is not the ground, but the skin of a god. As Ji Yunan's voice trailed off, the three of them felt the ground shake. It was as if something beneath the ground had awakened. No, it shouldn't be said that the ground was awakening. The ground itself was awakening. The first god of crafts was killed by the second god of death. At that time, he wasn't the Lord God yet. Ji Yunan's voice continued, he's the ancestor of all necromancers. In the eastern part of the Atrensa continent, Taoist Master Spirit Sun slowly walked into a dilapidated church. It was covered in dust and seemed to have been deserted for a long time. However, Taoist Ling Yang did not care at all. As if he was talking to an empty church, he said, "Lady Maria, please show yourself." No one responded. Taoist Spirit Sun gently drew a talisman in his hand and imprinted it on the roof of the cathedral. Then, a green light fell, and everything in the cathedral was clearly revealed. In a corner of the cathedral, many soldiers were lying in disorder. Some of them were no longer breathing, but most of them were moaning in pain. After this scene was clearly revealed, the nun who led the group finally got up and walked in front of Taoist Ling Yang. "My highest respect, Your Excellency." Nun Maria said obediently, "We are very willing to serve you, but I don't need you to do anything." Taoist Ling Yang interrupted her, "I only need you to step forward." Of course, there was a teleportation circle in the Dark Empire, so Claude could rush to the Ghost Garden. However, when he actually arrived, he found that things were not as he had imagined. What is this? In front of Claude was a giant that was hundreds of meters tall. He held a giant hammer in his hand, and his skin was dark. There was not the slightest sign of life on him. As one of the highest officials in the Dark Empire, Claude was all too familiar with this kind of aura. This was an undead creature, but how could there be such a powerful undead creature? Every swing of the black giant's hammer made Claude's heart palpitate. This great wizard, who was known as a demigod by the world, felt that he could be smashed into pieces with just one swing of the hammer. Of course, this feeling was not an illusion, because he could clearly see who was fighting with the black giant. The lithe figure holding the golden spear was the goddess of combat. How good would it be if we could make use of the undead creature that could fight the goddess of combat? Claude could not help but have such a thought. Even the Emperor of Darkness would not be a match for an existence of this level. If handled properly, this would become the ultimate trump card of the Dark Empire, establishing the foundation of the Empire's rule for thousands of years. However, at this moment, a figure appeared behind Claude. Great Wizard Claude! Claude suddenly turned his head, and saw a young man in a white robe looking at him with a smile. He was completely unable to determine the strength of the other party, but someone who could appear silently would not be a weakling no matter how he thought about it. Your Excellency is, haha, don't look at what you're not supposed to see. As soon as Ji Yunan's voice fell, Claude felt his vision go black, his head was instantly blasted, and a wisp of his true spirit awakened in another place. This place was extremely hidden. It was neither the palace of the Dark Empire, nor Claude's magic tower, but a place that seemed to have nothing to do with him. That was close. Claude's consciousness awoke in a body that had long been prepared, but he still had lingering fears. He thought of the figure of the young man in the white robe, but he could not figure out who it was. Among the gods related to the goddess of combat, was there such a being? Claude had no clue. But no matter what, at least 2 gods had descended on a Trenza, and there was a powerful undead creature. The news had to be sent back as soon as possible. However, just as he was about to get up, a familiar voice rang in his ears. A lick. Claude's entire body bounced up, his face looking like he had seen a ghost, because this voice was exactly the same as the one from before. Claude's thoughts turned quickly, and he quickly said, Your Excellency, you can't kill me. If I die, who will be the one? The next moment, he felt a sharp pain coming from the depth of his soul, and his true spirit was instantly torn apart. In the ghost garden, Karina was still fighting to her heart's content. David looked at Ji Yunan confusedly. What have you been doing? Looking at the black giant in front of him, Ji Yunan said in a low voice, Things are a bit different from what I expected. I had to ask Lewis to come and have a look. Div class equals other_links sad smiley download happy smiley, phone happy smiley to make it easier for you to read next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 428, Chapter 428. Chapter 389. As far as Ji Yunan knew, the first god of craftsmen was not this strong. Dragon. Altar. Book. Net. Although he had never completed this quest himself, he knew that the players needed to complete the quest would not be wrong. This was the basic quality of a professional player. At least in the guides he had read in his previous life, he had never heard of a quest that required a player to be at least a grade 9 or higher. That's right, the Dark Giant's combat power was already close to grade 9. The first god of craftsmen was not only a great blacksmith, but also had the power to match his tier. He was a real grade 10 god. After he died in the hands of the second god of death, he was successfully turned into an undead creature by the first necromancer in history. His power was reduced compared to when he was alive. After all, the undead did not have any rules and could only fight with the divine body left behind by the craftsman god. Fortunately, it was the craftsman god. If it were any other god, they would be even weaker. On the other hand, even if it was the first god of craftsmen, the undead giant was too strong. It was on par with Karina, which meant that it would not be easy for any player to kill it. You even provoked Lewis? Dave's eyes widened. He could not understand what Ji Yunan was thinking. Even if this person was not afraid of powerful gods, there was no need to provoke them, right? What would he gain by doing this? Ji Yunan did not say anything. Perhaps he was too lazy to talk to Dave. After all, the latter was no longer useful to him. Ji Yunan's eyes fell on the black giant. What would he gain by luring Lewis here? Of course there were benefits, and the biggest one was that he could accumulate enough damage. The craftsman god's undead was thicker than he had imagined. Ji Yunan had even tried to attack it himself, but neither his fists nor the shadow sword could do much damage to the dark giant. According to Lucian's estimation, it would take him at least half a day to kill this super undead creature. Karina was basically negligible, and she could not provide much damage. If he were to cause such a ruckus in Atrenza, it would attract the attention of the entire Pantheon world. By then, everyone would know about the existence of Ji Yunan, a unique existence. Before he reached grade 9 or even grade 10, he did not want to expose himself on a large scale. Let's go. Ji Yunan stood up and punched the black giant away. Then he grabbed Karina's shoulder and said, "Let's go." Karina was still not satisfied. It had been a long time since she met an opponent who could give her such a good fight. The two of them could be considered to be evenly matched, no one could kill the other. "You can leave by yourself," Karina said without hesitation. She wasn't Ji Yunan's subordinate. She didn't even care about Louis, so of course, she wouldn't care about Ji Yunan. Ji Yunan didn't use Austin to pressure her. If the fighting goddess was willing to stay and fight, it wouldn't hinder his plan. So, Ji Yunan shrugged and quickly disappeared. East. Taoist Ling Yang sat in his tent, sending out orders one after another. He was mobilizing enough troops to advance quickly, attacking cities and seizing land at an astonishing speed, quickly seizing the territory of the Dark Empire. And every single one of the banners they used was the name of the Light Church and the other gods of the Light God system. The banner of the Light Church was very useful. It hadn't been long since the Dark Empire conquered the world. It was impossible for them to win the support of the people in the territory of the Light Church. In fact, in the past few decades, the Light Church was much more powerful than the Dark Empire on the continent of Atrenza. The Dark Warrior Goro was the main reason why the Dark Empire was able to win the war. The rise of this new god was basically the path of the Dark Empire's victory. Therefore, when Taoist Ling Yang's troops took over the territory, they won the support of the local people almost effortlessly. Then, they gathered more power. This troop, which had started its rise from the east, snowballed like a single spark that started a prairie fire in a very short period of time. At least in the eastern region, they had the ability to threaten the rule of the Dark Empire. Of course, as the number of people in the Light Church increased, there were also some problems. For example, at this time, Maria was surrounded by several former commanders of the Holy Crusaders, who were wearing white armors and had blonde hair and blue eyes. "Lady Maria, how can the army of the Light Church be commanded by an outsider?" One of them said righteously. His armor was the oldest. Obviously, he didn't have a good life after the Holy War. This man was called Omiro. He used to be the commander of the Third Holy Crusader, one of the top 10 figures in the Light Church. It was because he received the news of the Light Church's revival that he hurried back. Unexpectedly, when Omiro arrived, he didn't see a single Holy Crusader. He was also quickly put under house arrest. He didn't expect to receive any courtesy or military power. "Master Omiro, I can understand how you feel." Maria looked helpless and comforted them. "But all the troops belong to that Taoist priest. We can't do anything about it." The word Taoist priest sounded like a tongue twister to these natives, but Taoist Ling Yang insisted. "Maybe at first." Omiro looked proud. "But it's different now. All the followers of our Lord have returned. How can the army be controlled by that person?" "That's right. He wants to use the name of the Light Church to win people's hearts, but he doesn't want us to interfere." "How can he do that?" Another commander next to him also chimed in. Lady Maria frowned. Deep down, she also wanted to restore the glory of the Light Church. She didn't want to be taken advantage of under the name of the Light Church. But now that the resistance against the Dark Empire had just started, she really didn't want any dirty tricks to happen. After thinking for a long time, Maria sighed and said, "How about this? I'll take you to see the Taoist priest." When they saw Taoist Master Spirit Yang, he was looking at a piece of information in his hand. There was a thoughtful expression on his face, and no one knew what he was thinking about. Maria told them the purpose of their visit. To her surprise, Taoist Ling Yang didn't show any dissatisfaction. Instead, he smiled and said, "No problem. I just happen to feel that I can't split myself and need some help." He spread the map in front of everyone and pointed at one of them. He said, "I just got the news that there's a very powerful death spirit creature here. Why don't you lead the troops to destroy it?" Maria wasn't familiar with the war, so she looked back at Omiro. Omiro and his companions looked at each other and immediately said, "It's an honor." "What's the specific place we're going to?" "Ghost Garden. Div class equals other underscore links text download address cell phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this time. Chapter 429 Chapter 4. Chapter 390. After confirming the location, Omello quickly left with his companions. Dragon altar book net they did not care about the powerful undead that the Daoist spirit son mentioned at all. In the years when they were in charge of the Vatican, they had killed countless undead souls, so they were very familiar with it. How powerful could the undead be? If the commanders of the Holy Crusaders worked together, they could even defeat a demigod-level Lich. After the old members of the church left, Shueren slowly appeared beside them. "Sending them to their deaths. You are indeed a cunning man." The Daoist spirit son smiled shyly. "There are quite a lot of people in the church. It would be too embarrassing to kill them directly. Sending them to their deaths is not a big deal. The undead that can fight against Karina is the real deal." He had already become serious by the end of his speech. The information that the Daoist spirit son saw when Maria brought her people in was about the battle between a powerful undead and the goddess of combat, Karina, in the Ghost Garden. It must be Jiu Nan, right? He really can't stay still no matter where he goes. Shueren revealed a funny expression and shook his head. He knew who Karina was with, so it was not difficult for him to infer that Jiu Nan was there. It would be good if Jiu Nan lured the undead here. The Daoist spirit son also smiled. To him, as long as the undead was not created by the Empire of Darkness, it would be good news. Because his ultimate goal was to create trouble that the Empire could not solve. "I'm just afraid that we will make too much noise and alert the enemy," Shueren suddenly said and handed over another piece of information to the Daoist spirit Sunday. The Daoist spirit son took it with a frown. The information contained in the information made his pupils constrict. It said, "Great Master Claude is dead, and the Emperor of Darkness has gone to the Ghost Garden in person." Knowing that there would be a battle between deities, and facing a being that could easily kill Claude, it would be underestimating the intelligence of the Emperor of Darkness if he thought that the Emperor of Darkness had gone there alone. The Daoist spirit son took a deep breath. He knew that his target was about to appear. After discovering that the craftsman god's undead was stronger than he had imagined and that he could not kill it quickly, Jiu Nan did not rush to make a move. Whatever he wanted, as long as the craftsman god's undead died, he would have it. He didn't care who killed the undead. More importantly, that thing was not very useful to others, and the possibility of even fighting over it was very small. The craftsman god's undead spirit would give out a blueprint, which was specially used to create divine kingdoms. Jiu Nan could use that building, but neither Karina nor Lewis, who had reached the level 10 level and had a perfect divine kingdom, needed it. That was why Jiu Nan killed Claude, hoping to attract the attention of the Dark Empire. As long as Lewis's attention was drawn here and noticed the existence of the craftsman god's undead soul, it was highly likely that he would show up in person. At the very least, he would consider subduing this undead soul. However, Jiu Nan did not expect that the first to arrive was not the army of the Dark Empire, but the Holy Crusaders. Too sloppy. They have no sense of honor as a Holy Crusader. On the way, a commander of the Holy Crusaders could not help but complain. It's their honor to fight for the Holy Light. They will understand sooner or later. Omiro was not in a hurry, and he said to his companions. Although Daoist spirit son didn't form the Holy Crusader army, when Omello and the other commanders stepped forward, an army called the Holy Crusader Army was quickly formed. Of course, the result of forcing a new army was that the military discipline was extremely sloppy, which was unacceptable to the commanders. "We're almost there, cheer up." Omiro suddenly looked at the ground, as if he had sensed something, and shouted loudly. The other commanders were also slightly excited. As veterans in dealing with undead creatures, they all knew where Omiro's judgment came from. Wherever powerful undead creatures existed, their death energy would naturally dissipate and affect the surrounding space and land. It was especially easy for new undead creatures to be born on land that was eroded by the death energy. Therefore, Every powerful undead creature often represented an undead army. As expected, it did not take long for the Holy Crusaders to encounter a large number of weak undead creatures, but they were easily taken care of. Didn't they say that the undead creature was just born? Why are there so many undead soldiers? Omiro frowned, and the army became more cautious as they advanced. In any case, the commanders were good at leading troops. As the Holy Crusaders slowly advanced, more and more undead creatures died in their hands, but the damage was quite limited. However, Omiro's uneasiness grew. Not only were there more undead creatures than he had imagined, but the area of this dead land was also a little too big. How powerful were the so-called powerful undead creatures? Omiro soon found out. The Holy Crusaders did not go far. The huge black giant first came into everyone's sight. Near the black giant, there was a golden light moving rapidly. Every time the golden light collided with the giant, there would be an unimaginable aftershock. What kind of undead is this? Omiro stared at the scene, dumbfounded. This dark giant was beyond his understanding of undead creatures. It's the undead of a deity. A soft sigh came from beside him. Omiro suddenly turned around and saw a soft-looking young man in a dark purple robe standing there. Omiro did not recognize the young man, but he recognized the person standing next to him. The middle-aged man in black standing behind the young man. Omiro would never forget his face. The Emperor of Darkness. The creator of the Empire of Darkness, the man who single-handedly led countless armies to destroy the Light Church. Holy light above. Omiro let out an angry roar. He drew the long sword at his waist and quickly rushed toward the Emperor of Darkness. As long as he could kill this man, even if he had to die immediately, Omiro would gladly endure it. However, the only response he got was a cold look from the Emperor of Darkness. The Emperor did not even try to move, because he knew very well that the enemy would not be able to get close to him. The leader began to charge, and the Holy Crusaders followed closely behind. However, they soon realized that something was wrong. They could only see that it was getting darker and darker in front of them. It was as if they had stepped into an endless darkness. The young man in purple stood where he was, but there seemed to be endless darkness behind him. Sleep in the darkness forever. The young man sighed softly. The entire Holy Crusaders were instantly buried in the darkness. The Emperor of Darkness did not even look at them. He only looked at the black giant and asked in confusion, "Ancestor, who is this?" "The first generation of the god of craftsmen," the young man in purple said softly, his eyes flashing with a strange light. This is an opportunity. Div class equals other_links text download address, mobile reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 430. Chapter 391. This is an opportunity. Dragon altar book net Daoist Spirit Sun stood in the sky, his gaze on the Emperor of Darkness as he spoke softly. Of course, Daoist Spirit Sun knew who the two people below were. They were the Emperor of Darkness and his ancestor, the God of Darkness, Lewis. Daoist Spirit Sun tried his best to control his gaze from falling on Lewis. For a Type 10 powerhouse of this level, they were extremely sensitive to their surroundings. Just the concentration of a gaze was enough for them to sense it. Especially Daoist Spirit Sun's malicious gaze. His appearance on the main plane is indeed your best chance. Shueren did not look at Lewis either. He was not looking at anything, as this was none of his business. After saying this, he said, somewhat amused, "You've been planning for this day for 1,000 years. In the end, you've been lured out by Jiu Nan before the plan could even be carried out. What do you think?" Shueren almost burst out laughing at the end of his sentence, but he did not embarrass his old friend. The old priest's story was not complicated at all. As an old friend, Shueren knew this very well. Daoist Spirit Sun had come to the world of gods to explore before he became the master of the stars. It was because of this experience that he stood out in the fight for the position of sect leader of the Xianqing sect, and finally took control of the Xianqing realm. It was also during his journey in the world of gods that he met a goddess who had helped him greatly. Even after he became the master of the Xianqing realm, he did not forget this goddess. Unfortunately, by the time he had time to return to the world of gods, she had already fallen. She had died at the hands of Lewis. The blue water goddess, Margaret. After 1,000 years, even her descendants did not remember that their ancestor was once a god. But Daoist Spirit's son still remembered. Even though they had only had a few simple interactions, far from being lovers, Daoist Spirit's son could not be sure if Margaret still remembered him. But that was not important. She was dead, and he wanted revenge. It was that simple. This old Taoist priest was such a stubborn person. However, it would not be easy to kill Lewis. Putting aside the fact that the Gloom God was a level 10 god, the most basic problem was that in the world of gods, Taoist Spirit's son was unable to mobilize the power of the astral world. The bit wall had a great impact. Except for people like Ji Yunan who relied on their bodies to fight, normal Star Lords couldn't even exert 80% of their combat power. Fortunately, there was a place like the main plane. In the world of gods, the primary plane was a very special existence. The laws of space in the world of gods were very stable, and the primary plane was especially stable. Existences that had stabilized to the level of main gods were completely unable to enter the main plane with their true bodies. Even an ordinary god would not be able to use the power of the divine kingdom on the main plane. Here, Liu Yi's combat strength was not much stronger than Daoist Spirit Yang's. Therefore, Shui Ren said that this was his best opportunity. However, the awkward thing was that this opportunity wasn't created by him, but was created for him by Ji Yunan. Laugh if you want to. Daoist Spirit Yang didn't expect that the spectre would be so attractive to Lewis, but it was not a bad thing. As long as they could achieve their goal, it didn't matter even if they abandoned most of their 1,000-year plan. Shui Ren coughed to ease the awkwardness. Let's not talk about this. Now that Lewis is here, how confident are you? Do you need me to help? In Shui Ren's eyes, they only had one best opportunity. Once they alerted the spectre, it would be very difficult to kill a 10th grade god. Daoist Spirit Yang's eyes were still on the ground. Wait a little longer. Lewis was looking at the black giant. He felt a little uneasy, but it did not alarm him. Standing in front of the first god of craftsmen, if he did not feel threatened at all, then there must be something wrong with his intuition. The dark god was also a god who had lived for countless years. He was no stranger to the death of the first god of craftsmen, but he did not know that the first god of craftsmen died in a trenza. Karina. He did not intend to hide himself, so he showed up directly. The commotion caused by the combat goddess was too big. It wouldn't be long before countless gods would notice this place. When that time came, there would be a lot more competitors to take down this undead. Karina had been fighting against the black giant for a long time. She turned around when she heard Lucian's shout. "Oh, it's you. What's up?" Karina did not stop. She stabbed the black giant's palm with her spear again. It seemed that the combat goddess did not realize that two of her teammates had already run away. Lewis did not want to mess with this crazy woman, so he asked, "The craftsman's spectre is your target?" "I want the living spectre. If our goals are not conflicting, we can work together." Karina's eyes lit up. "You can catch him. Do you have time for me to fight?" She was a bit tired, but she also felt that it would be a pity to let this opponent go. It would be great if someone could control the spectre so that she could have time to beat him up. Of course. Lewis smiled. He was not surprised by Karina's answer. Every veteran god knew what kind of person the combat goddess was. Deal. Karina agreed without any hesitation. She was not afraid that Lewis would go back on his words. If there was no spectre, she could just go and fight Lewis. "Work together? Count me in too." Another voice came in. The voice sounded dry and cold, as if iron sheets were rubbing against each other. Beside them, another person appeared out of nowhere. It was a skinny old man with wrinkles all over his face. Stevenson, the skeleton saint, was another big shot in the dark gods. He was also one of the few people who became a god as a spectre. Stevenson, the skeleton saint, was another big shot in the dark gods. He was also one of the few people who became a god as a spectre. Stevenson. Lewis stared at him for a while and said in a low voice, "I want the spectre, and Karina wants him to fight. What do you need?" A cold smile appeared on the old face of the skeleton saint. I need him to do some research. It won't affect his activity. The skeleton saint walked on the path of a skeleton sorcerer, which was very similar to a human necromancer. Therefore, he had no reason to let go of the masterpiece of the second-generation god of death. Lewis pondered for a while and finally nodded. Only Shui Ren, who was in the sky, looked at Taoist spirit son with a meaningful look. So, you have a helper div class equals other_links download address mobile reading for the convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 431 Chapter 4. Chapter 392. When the three gods reached an agreement, it was not difficult to deal with the spectre. Dragon Audiobook Network, after all, they had the skeleton sage, an undead master, with them. Their goal was not to kill the undead, but to find a way to control it, or even subdue it. After a long time of training, the craftsman god spectre had lost its self-awareness. It could only act according to its instinct. Time has worn away the craftsman god's will. Now, it only has the instinct of a spectre. It's not difficult to control it, Stevenson said. I'm curious. How did it wake up? A spectre that had been sleeping for tens of thousands of years would not wake up by itself. The skeleton sage looked at Karina. If the two knew that this spectre was released by someone on purpose, they would be more vigilant. Karina did not care about that. She just urged them to subdue the spectre as soon as possible. Stevenson shook his head and said, I'll set up a magic circle. You guys control it and weaken its fire of the soul as much as possible. Just wait for the magic circle to finish. Weakening the spectre's fire of the soul was actually to hurt it as much as possible. Karina shrugged, indicating that there was nothing she could do. Lewis said, leave it to me. Although Gloomy Dark was not good at attacking or defending, he was a level 10 god after all. The difference in rank was enough for him to deal enough damage. Many people thought that Karina's attack was too weak, but in fact, they ignored her real rank. With her level 8 power, it was natural that she would end up like this when facing a level 9 or even level 10 enemy. When she reached level 10, she would probably be invincible below the main god level. The skeleton sage was busy setting up the magic circle, while the other two began to attack the spectre. Karina was in charge of restraining the spectre, while Lewis was in charge of killing. Compared to the combat goddess, Lewis actually knew more about how to kill undead creatures. In other words, he had more ways to do it. The sharp Gloomy Dark fell down and directly cut off a small part of the black giant's head, revealing the burning fire of the soul inside. The black giant did not feel anything until Gloomy Dark landed on the fire. Then, it let out a shocking roar. What a tough soul, Lewis exclaimed. There was more joy than annoyance in his eyes. Although such a soul would bring him trouble now, once he could subdue this undead, he would be able to survive for a long time. Lewis could almost see himself easily occupying a main plane for 10,000 years and accumulating a huge amount of power of faith. One dark beam after another struck the black giant's soul fire, causing it to roar continuously. However, it was powerless to resist the two's attacks. Karina could easily block all of his attacks, and the dark god was not affected by him at all. Finally, as the craftsman god's aura weakened, Stevenson's array was completed. Lewis was very satisfied with the death chi that soared into the sky. The skeleton sage had put in a lot of effort, or else it would have been very difficult to set up a formation of this level in a short period of time. At the thought of this, Lewis suddenly realized something, but it was too late. A white bone staff was pointed at his back, and the unique deep voice of the skeleton sage sounded. Then, fall into the trap, Lord Lewis. A ball of white flame burst out from the top of the white bone staff, instantly swallowing Lewis. This kind of attack could not really hurt Lewis, but it could make him fall into the array that had just been set up. Lewis was right. The skeleton sage had indeed prepared for this, and it was prepared for him. Just as Liu Yi was about to land, a Dao talisman fell from the sky and landed on top of Liu Yi's head. The talisman emitted a dazzling green light and began to crazily drill into Lewis's body. Inside the skeleton sage's array, Lewis could not free his hands to stop it, and could only watch as the green light entered his body. Taoist Spirit Son's figure began to slowly walk out. He could finally look at the purple-robed young man in front of him unscrupulously. Lewis seemed to have sensed the malice of the intruder, and he finally figured out who the mastermind behind this was. It was normal that he did not recognize the other party. Lewis had killed too many people in his life. How could he remember all of them? Only the other party could find the skeleton sage to help him. This was something that he did not expect at all. Stevenson, this won't do you any good. The green light entered Lewis's body, so he chose not to resist. Instead, he looked at the skeleton sage. You can't give me anything, but this, well, Taoist spirit son can. Obviously, Stevenson did not know much about the world, and the way he addressed Taoist spirit son was a bit ridiculous. Lewis's eyes turned cold. He tried to use the law of darkness, but it did not work. Instead, the green light entered his body even faster. The man in the strange clothes was obviously using all of his strength to activate the green light, hoping that it would work as soon as possible. Lewis did not know what the green light was, but he knew that it was not something good. Lucian looked at Carina. The goddess of combat was not trapped in the magic circle. In other words, she still had the strength to help. However, before he said anything, Stevenson already said, Lady Carina, after we take care of Lewis, I will give you a complete and controllable undead soul of the craftsman god. Carina also stopped and showed an indifferent expression. She was not afraid of being lied to. Another way to help was cut off, but Lewis's expression did not change. Instead, he became silent. As for the craftsman god's undead spirit beside him, its soul fire was already on the verge of death, and it continued to be consumed within the bone array. If Taoist spirit son had been a bit slower, the undead soul of the craftsman god would have been destroyed before Lewis died. At that moment, the Emperor of Darkness, who had been standing below, suddenly sighed. He said to someone in the team behind him, Goro, I'll leave it to you. A man wearing pitch-black armor and holding a large black sword walked out slowly. He smiled and said, It seems that Lord Lewis was right to be cautious. I did not expect that my backup plan. The pitch-black warrior, Goro, slightly raised his large sword and said, It will come in handy. The next moment, the pitch-black figure suddenly appeared in the air, at the same level as the deities, and slashed down with his sword. At the same time, Lewis, who had been silent all this time, suddenly raised his head. Two beams of purple light shot out from his eyes, and he aimed at Taoist Spirit Sunday. The last bit of the gloomy dark power broke the array. Taoist Spirit Sun was going to use the magic talisman, so he could not avoid it. A ball of sword aura fell from the sky and accurately blocked in front of Taoist Spirit Sunday. Then Shui Ren appeared. However, he did not look proud. After saving his old friend, he could not do anything else to stop the pitch-black warrior. Finally, Lewis let out a cold smile and said loudly, You can't deal with them. You can't deal with them. Help me break this formation and release the craftsman god's undead spirit. Div class equals other underscore links text download mobile reading to make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 432 Chapter 4. Chapter 393. No matter how one looked at it, Lewis's choice was not wrong. Daoist Spirit Yang had already done this to the extreme, making use of all the conditions that could be used. The skeleton sage used a magic formation to besiege, Daoist Spirit Yang's Dao talisman was a killing move, and Shui Ren was a backup to prevent Lewis from doing anything out of desperation. This was a very rigorous plan. In other words, Lewis only needed to cut off one link in the entire plan. Hit in the middle. Please wait a moment after the content has been updated. Please refresh the page to get the latest update. Pamp, div class equals other underscore links text download address phone reading for the convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this time. Chapter 433 Death. Chapter 394. The scene at the scene of the division of loot suddenly froze. The skeleton sage glanced at Master Lingyang and found that the latter did not say anything. Their cooperation was limited to Lewis, and they were not friends in private. A sneer appeared on Stevenson's old face. In his eyes, the other party knew that he was alone and wanted to take advantage of him. However, he was a little surprised that Carina would do such a thing together with the other party. Hit in the middle. Please wait a moment after the content has been updated. Please refresh the page to get the latest update. Pamp, div class equals other underscore links download address phone reading. For the convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 434 Chapter 4. Chapter 395. The Heavenly Worlds. Dragon Altar Booknet. Longtanshu. Near Jiyunan's God Kingdom, two figures were pacing back and forth. They looked around the surrounding space, as if they were looking for a suitable place to ambush. Elder Zi Luo will return sooner or later, and so will Jiyunan. He has just returned to the Heavenly Worlds, and has yet to take control of everything. This is our best chance. One of them was a monk, and the other was a Taoist priest. The Taoist priest was speaking. However, the two of them were a little strange. The monk had short hair and carried a long sword on his back, looking more like the legendary sword cultivators. The Taoist priest held a horsetail whisk and wore a Taoist crown on his head, but he wore a neat Buddhist robe. The gold and red colors intertwined and were very eye-catching. The monk didn't look like a monk, and the Taoist priest didn't look like a Taoist priest. They were a famous monk and Taoist duo in the Heavenly Worlds, the Sword Arhat and the Buddhist Taoist priest. The Sword Arhat agreed with the Buddhist Taoist priest, but still felt a little sullen. That Duan guy has a grudge against Jiyunan, but is using us as cannon fodder. There's nothing we can do. The Buddhist Taoist priest sighed. Who asked the sect master to return, but we even got the sun wrong and let the Real Sun die at the hands of Jiyunan? The Sword Arhat sneered. Isn't it all because of Lu Wen? If he hadn't switched people back then. Forget it. The Buddhist Taoist priest waved his hand and lightly flicked his horsetail whisk, interrupting him. Only by killing Jiyunan will we have a chance to make up for it. Be prepared, we can't let him return to the astral plane. The Sword Arhat nodded silently. Before Lorenza attained the Tao, Jiyunan had single-handedly fought against Fang Chaoyun in the astral plane. From then on, no one under the 13 skies dared to say they could defeat Jiyunan, because as long as he hid in the astral plane, no one would be able to do anything to him. Xie Yun had failed again. As one of the 9 people who had come here from the all heavens, Xie Yun's aptitude could be said to be one of the best. The only one who could compare to her was An Tianxing. Liang Ruxin was the most experienced and the steadiest among the 9, but in terms of aptitude, he still couldn't compare to these two kids. But even so, Xie Yun, who was 16 years old this year, was destined to be the last among the 9 to get the root. She might not even get the route because Jiyunan's return was not far away. Gunner expert doesn't suit you. Jiyunan placed a data sheet in front of the girl and said indifferently. After several challenges, Jiyunan had long realized the problem, but he had never mentioned it to Xie Yun until she came to ask for help. Why? Xie Yun lowered her head to take a look. She was blinded by the data that she couldn't understand. She asked, unconvinced. Your knowledge of firearms is seriously lacking, whether it's the manufacturing or the assembly of firearms, let alone the modification that suits you best. Jiyunan paused for a moment, then pointed at the paper and said, this is the name of every firearm you've used. You don't even know what they're called and what their functions are. How are you supposed to use them? I love firearms, Xie Yun said loudly, and isn't the more expensive the better? Jiyunan shook his head. It was undoubtedly very embarrassing for her to play with guns like this. Oh, speaking of which, there really was a route that suited her. Jiyunan was startled, but it did remind him of a very special route. There were too many routes that players could take in their professions in the game. Even Jiyunan couldn't remember all of them. The routes he had written for the 9 people were just routes that were more cost-effective and easier to take. If you just like to play with guns, you can try this route. Jiyunan quickly lowered his head and wrote down a piece of information before handing it to Xie Yun. Xie Yun looked down in confusion, only to see the words Krypton Expert written at the top of the paper. The official name of the Krypton Expert should be Gold Devouring Expert. This route was very special. Players could obtain a natal weapon and then upgrade it by spending money. The natal weapon could be whatever the player wanted, but it couldn't be changed after the initial route was chosen. It could only evolve. The upgrade of the natal weapon would also bring about the player's own upgrade. To put it simply, one could only become stronger by spending money. Strengthening by consuming gold? Yun understood this time because the logic of the upgrade of the Krypton expert was indeed very simple. Just spend money. Moreover, the gold referred to here was really the metal itself. Any other form of currency or valuable items were useless. When she saw the introduction of the natal weapon, her eyes lit up. Can I choose a gun? Of course. I've decided on this. Yun came and left in a hurry, but it didn't affect what happened. Nan sat in the flowery divine kingdom, witnessing with his own eyes the birth of the second unification of paths. It had been almost 2 days since the anomaly in the divine kingdom. The anomaly in the Pantheon world was now so intense that even level 4 could sense it. Elder Z Luo was breaking through, and everyone outside was waiting silently for the critical point to arrive. Breaking through was a slow and drawn-out process. It couldn't be done immediately by shouting breakthrough. It was like adding strands of straw to a camel's body. It might seem like the last straw had undergone a qualitative change, but in reality, it was no different from the previous straw. It's here. Ren's voice rang in Nan's ears. The number 1 swordsman in the world had appeared beside Nan at some point in time. There was a relieved smile on his face. You seem nervous. Nan could see the worry in the depths of his eyes. Of course. Ren smiled casually. If the old man fails to break through, I'm afraid we'll have to rebuild the astral plane here. There's no such thing as a guaranteed success in unification of paths. No one dared to say that they would definitely succeed in unification of paths. Ren and Nan had openly offended the 13 heavens. Once the news of Elder Z Luo's failure to break through spread, their astral planes would probably be destroyed immediately. Even if Song Fei didn't do it himself and didn't say anything, there were plenty of people willing to do it for him. He didn't need to say anything at all. Almost at the same time Ren spoke, Nan saw a beam of purple light in the sky. It was as if something had awakened in the depths of the flowery divine kingdom and was shooting toward the sky. However, at this moment, a beam of light came from the east and landed directly on the beam of purple light. The beam of light from the east seemed to have pierced through space and hit the purple light the moment it lit up. It was only then that people had a chance to see the formation of the beam of light clearly. It was clearly a ruler, simple and old-fashioned, just like the ones used in private schools in the countryside. Div class equals other _ links, text download address, phone reading. For easier reading next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 435 Chapter 4